Chapter 5:26. When Ron walked out of the loft, he found that Mary was already waiting at the door. When Mary saw Ron, she gently bowed and smiled. "Ron, you finally came out. Master instructed me to wait for you here." "Wait for me?" Ron was a little stunned. "Yes." Mary smiled and bowed again. "Please follow me." Ron followed Mary through a garden and arrived at a plaza. In the plaza, a tall building appeared before his eyes. It was a huge triangular tower that pierced through the clouds like a sharp sword. All sorts of magic runes were carved on the tower. "What is this?" Ron asked in surprise when he felt the aura coming from the tower. "This is a power converter," Mary smiled and said. She didn't tell Ron what this thing was for. Instead, she said to him, "Ron, please follow me." Ron followed Mary through the small door of the tower and walked into this strange triangular tower. There was a small door at the bottom of the triangular tower for people to enter and exit. After entering the interior of the triangular tower, the tower was a little dark, but it didn't pose much of an obstacle to Ron's vision. Through the weak light, Ron saw a huge pool that went all the way to the center and was descending. Around the pool were sculptures of several creatures that looked like dragons. The dragons were opening their mouths wide as if they were about to spit something out. There was no water in the pool. It was dry. "Ron, go inside," Mary said to Ron. Ron nodded and walked to the center of the pool along a flight of stairs made of some unknown material. Mary waved her hand slightly and Ron's feet moved. He almost couldn't stand steadily. A semicircular device suddenly rose from under his feet. What is this?" Ron was shocked. He stood on a tall rock and didn't know what to do. "It's nothing. Sit properly. Just like how you usually cultivate," Mary said kindly. "This is a power converter. It can convert origin energy into soul force that you cultivate." Origin energy? Ron was stunned. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing. However, he obeyed and sat down in the middle of the semicircular stone. "I think you must be familiar with this thing." Mary nodded and said with a smile. As she spoke, she took out a few black things from her bosom. "These are black crystal coins." Ron was shocked. However, he didn't know why Mary took out the black crystal coins. That's right. The black crystal coin is the crystallization of the power of origin. It is also the specific manifestation of the power of origin. As Mary spoke, her hand moved slightly and the black crystal coin slowly rose from her palm. The black crystal coin seemed to have magical powers as it rose higher and higher in Ron's eyes. In the end, it rose to the ceiling of the triangular tower. There was a magical formation engraved on the ceiling. The magical formation opened its arms as if to welcome the arrival of the black crystal coin. With a click, the black crystal coin was embedded in the magical formation above Ron's head. It looked like a resplendent gem in the night sky. Mary heaved a sigh of relief. Her wrinkled brows smoothed out. She smiled at Ron and said, "Ron, are you ready?" "Ready?" Ron was a little surprised when he heard Mary's words. "What do I need to prepare?" "Prepare to advance to Sacred Domain Expert." Mary smiled. As soon as her voice fell, the small box containing the black crystal coin suddenly emitted a dazzling light. At this moment, the entire triangular tower seemed to have come alive. It started to rotate continuously. Those mysterious magical runes seemed to be burning as they emitted traces of blue light. At the same time, a dazzling light suddenly shrouded Ron's head, illuminating the dark space around him. At the same time, the eyes of the several dragon-like creature sculptures lit up. With a splash, a jet of black water spurted out from their mouth. The black water column in the pool, under the illumination of the blue light, slowly rose into the air like water vapor, constantly floating in the air. This. Ron was flabbergasted. That black energy wasn't anything. It was the most primitive and pure soul energy. This soul energy penetrated the entire space and gathered towards the center of the pool. Ron only felt an explosion in his mind. Countless soul energy poured in and drilled into his soul like soul strands. Ron's soul was like a land that had been dry for a long time encountering spring dew. He frantically absorbed the soul energy. Ron could feel that his soul energy was rapidly growing. As he absorbed a large amount of soul energy, Ron's sea of knowledge started to tremble. The soul floating above his sea of knowledge was constantly growing stronger. At this moment, Mary's voice sounded in Ron's ears. "Ron, don't be distracted. Concentrate on absorbing the soul energy." Ron's heart trembled when he heard Mary's words. He immediately calmed his mind and quietly entered a state of cultivation. After calming down, Ron's absorption of soul energy became noticeably faster. A faint membrane of light appeared around his body. Black soul energy happily swam around his body. This soul energy was simply too massive. Even though Ron was frantically absorbing it, he could only absorb a portion of it. He could only slowly digest and absorb it. Black crystal coins were the crystallization of the universe's origin energy. These crystals were being converted into soul energy through the energy converter for Ron to absorb. After absorbing a large amount of soul energy, Ron's strength was rapidly growing. Ron looked at Ron, who was cultivating inside the energy converter. Her eyes flashed with gratification as she muttered to herself, "With Master's permission, I can only use 5 black crystal coins." "Ron, how much energy you can absorb from these 5 black crystal coins will depend on you. I hope you can advance to the sacred domain as soon as possible." The origin energy within the black crystal coins was released and converted into soul energy for Ron to absorb. However, how much Ron could absorb would depend on his luck. It was also possible that he might not be able to absorb any at all. In that case, the 5 black crystal coins worth nearly 100 million gold coins would be completely wasted. It would also fail to live up to Lord Noah's painstaking efforts. However, this was not a problem for Ron. He concentrated on his cultivation. A large amount of soul energy was being absorbed into his body. At the same time, Ron's soul energy also began to grow stronger. Soon, he reached the boundary of master rank. At this moment, he began to break through the barrier. Once he broke through the barrier, he would become a bona fide sacred domain expert. Ron was well aware of this. That was why he especially cherished the opportunity before him. Ron sat in the middle of the energy converter with his eyes closed like a meditating old monk. The pool was already filled with a black liquid that looked like flowing blood. As if summoned, the liquid turned into water vapor and gathered around Ron's body. It lingered on. Ron did not reject it. He absorbed it madly. Green flames erupted from his body. The flames burned as if they were evaporating all the water vapor. Mary looked at Ron for a while before silently walking out. Chapter 527. Apart from Mary, the matter of Ron's advancement to the sacred domain also affected another person's heart, and that was Noah. Noah was standing on a small hill, quietly looking at the small triangular tower in the distance. The triangular tower was constantly rotating, mysterious runes appearing and disappearing from time to time. Black light soared into the sky, forming a huge energy vortex in the sky. Vast amounts of origin energy were shining down through the triangular tower. For a moment, even the surrounding space revealed traces of abnormality. Noah stood quietly, not saying a word. Even though his expression was normal, one could still see that his heart was filled with anticipation. Mary's figure appeared behind Noah. She gently bowed and said, "Master, Ron has begun absorbing the origin energy." Noah nodded lightly and replied noncommittally. "I'm watching," said Mary. "According to Master's instructions, I have already used 5 black crystal coins to help Ron advance. I just don't know how much he can absorb and whether or not he can become a sacred domain powerhouse." Noah nodded calmly. 5 black crystal coins are more than enough. Although the power converted by the energy converter matches his, it's not an easy task to absorb it. It requires extremely high talent and a firm mind. If the soul power converted from so much origin energy can't help Ron advance to the sanctuary realm, then there's no need for me to help him anymore. Noah nodded calmly. 5 black crystal coins are enough. Although the energy converted from the origin energy is compatible with his own strength, it's not easy to absorb it. It requires extremely high talent and a firm mind. Noah said calmly, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Yes, Master. Mary replied. I understand. Mary fell silent at this moment. She stood behind Noah and stared at the tower in the distance together. The triangular tower in the distance continued to rotate. A large amount of origin energy was converted through the energy converter. Light radiated in all directions, and the overflowing energy filled the entire sky. Of course, this was not something that could be finished in a short period of time. After watching for a long time, Mary was already feeling bored. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask, Master, can I ask you a question? Go ahead, Noah replied. His eyes were still fixed on the triangular tower in the distance, motionless. Master, with your status and identity, why are you helping a necromancer? Mary asked. Do you really owe someone a favor? Favors are only one aspect. Noah glanced at her and answered. When I was wandering in the divine realm, the Calamity Army wrote pornographic novels. Heremos did save me. As for helping Ron, Noah paused. This involves a huge secret. This secret is related to the Scourge Church. I have a feeling that the key to unlocking this secret lies with Ron. What secret? Mary asked curiously. Noah smiled but did not answer. Mary shrugged. She knew better than to ask further. Since her master didn't want to answer, it was useless to ask further. The two of them continued to look at the triangular tower in the distance. Within the triangular tower, Ron's absorption of the soul force had reached a critical point. Countless soul forces surged into his body and into his consciousness, strengthening his soul. At this moment, Ron's forehead was covered in sweat. He still had his eyes closed as he quietly absorbed. Ron watched his soul force continue to expand. His heart was filled with shock. At this moment, his consciousness was almost filled to the brim with soul force. It was like a sealed pool that was filled to the brim with water but still continued to fill. He had never thought that soul force could increase to such a degree. It's still increasing. It's still increasing. Ron looked at the increasing soul force in his consciousness and muttered, Heavens! Just how much more soul force do I need to reach the sacred domain? Ron's strength had long reached the peak of the master level. He originally thought that breaking through the sacred domain would be a matter of minutes. Perhaps in the near future, he would be able to break through the sacred domain and become a true powerhouse of the sacred domain. But now, even after absorbing so much soul power, there were still no signs of a breakthrough. At this moment, he finally understood that there was only a thin barrier between the peak of the master level and the sanctuary realm, and this thin barrier was an insurmountable gap. Just a little bit more and it would be impossible to cross it. The only thing that could be crossed was the sacred domain. Many master-level powerhouses were stuck in front of this gap, unable to break through for the rest of their lives. Hurry up! Absorb faster! At this moment, Ron was a little anxious. His heart trembled unconsciously. If I don't hurry up... Ron gritted his teeth. His consciousness began to revolve wildly. At the same time, the speed at which he absorbed the soul force around him increased by 10 times. This was a very dangerous move. Madly absorbing foreign soul force like this was very dangerous. This untamed soul force was filled with violence. After entering an unfamiliar soul, it would run wild. Ron also knew that this was a very dangerous move. However, He couldn't care less because he sensed that 4 of the 5 black crystal coins in the magic formation above his head had already been used. The origin energy contained in the 4 black crystal coins had already been converted into soul force and entered his consciousness. If he couldn't break through even after the last black crystal coin was used up, it would mean that all his efforts would be in vain. As for the surrounding soul power, it was obvious that the surrounding soul power had weakened. But that wasn't all. After absorbing a lot of undigested soul force, Ron's consciousness suddenly shook. He felt a sharp pain in his head. No. Not good. Ron was shocked, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. He had gone too far. At this moment, Ron was filled with regret. He immediately focused his mind and tried his best to control the chaotic soul force. Unfortunately, it was too late. His soul force began to collapse. In his consciousness, countless soul forces were running wild, constantly attacking his soul. The soul force that had been controlled by his soul began to backfire. The black sea-like soul force were like rebellious soldiers, attacking their commander. Chaos, everything was in chaos. Under the backlash of the soul force, Ron's consciousness began to collapse. His fragile soul, under the assault of the violent soul force, let out a painful howl. The little person in Ron's mind became distorted due to the invasion of the soul force. Ron's body moved. He suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. This meant that his soul had been injured. Although it didn't look like he was injured, the injury to his soul was more serious than an external injury. No matter how hard Ron tried, he couldn't control the violent soul force. At this moment, the origin energy outside his body was also in disorder. On a distant hillside, a gentle wind gently blew. At this moment, Noah's eyes were staring into the distance. His brows were knitted tighter and tighter. After a long time, he finally let out a soft sigh. It seems that Ron has failed. Noah shook his head. His mind was still too impatient, causing the power to backfire. Mary also let out a soft sigh. It seemed that the 5 black crystal coins that her master gave to Ron had been wasted. The chaotic soul force was constantly overflowing from Ron's body, causing his own soul force to drain away. Is there really no other way? Ron was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. At this moment, he finally panicked. No matter how hard he tried, it was useless. The small stream had become a surging river. In front of the surging river, his weak soul force was like a small boat that could capsize at any time. If Ron lost all of his soul force, he would lose everything and become a powerless ordinary person. This was the price of blood. However, this lesson was too heavy for Ron. After a while, he would be left with nothing. Ron's heart had already sunk into despair. At this moment, in Ron's almost empty sea of consciousness, there was a sudden commotion. The commotion came from the depths of his soul. The whirlpool above Ron's soul suddenly changed and started to spin crazily. The loss of soul force seemed to have heard the call of its master and started to slow down. What's going on? Ron opened his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Seeing that he was about to become a cripple, he finally saw a glimmer of hope at this moment. It was the soul ring. It was the power of the soul ring. At this moment, the main body that was absorbing the soul force was the soul ring. In front of the small soul ring, the incomparably violent soul force became as docile as a sheep. Not only that, the lost soul force also started to return and replenish the already empty sea of consciousness. His sea of consciousness instantly became full. Ron's soul started to calm down and his sea of consciousness started to expand. In just an instant there was such a shocking reversal. Not only that, the soul ring was also crazily absorbing the external soul force. At this moment, the soul barrier that had trapped Ron for a long time finally had a crack. There's no hope. There's no hope, forget it, let's go. After a while, Noah saw that the situation didn't improve. His face was filled with disappointment. He shook his head and sighed. Step by step, he walked down the hill. Mary let out a long sigh. Her face was filled with regret. They had already tried their best. It was Ron who didn't live up to expectations. He couldn't blame anyone else. Noah's heart was heavy. He walked down the hill step by step. No one knew what he was thinking. His foot slipped and he almost fell. Master, be careful. Mary supported him. Noah shook his head and pushed Mary away, indicating that he was fine. Suddenly, Noah's heart skipped a beat. He abruptly turned his head and looked into the distance. His eyes flashed with an inconceivable light. Master, what's wrong? Mary felt that something was wrong with her master and hurriedly asked. At this moment, the triangular tower had already undergone a shocking change. Within the triangular tower, the chaotic aura suddenly changed. It became orderly and vigorous. At the same time, an incomparably tyrannical energy overflowed from the tower. It was like an eruption of a mountain. Its might shook the entire heaven and earth. Impossible! Ron, he broke through? Mary opened her eyes wide. Her face was filled with disbelief. Didn't he completely collapse because he absorbed too much energy? Noah smiled and said, Looks like this kid's luck is pretty good. Within the triangular tower, a black aura rushed into the sky. It was like a natural disaster had descended. It emitted a strange and terrifying aura. Countless clouds of smoke floated into the air and covered half the sky. It was a clear day, but now it was completely dark. Within the small semicircular stone, Ron suddenly opened his eyes. His pitch-black eyes shot out a bright light. He quietly felt the vast star-like soul force flowing through his body. His heart was filled with joy. Success, I've finally succeeded. Ron couldn't help but clench his fists. He looked up to the sky and roared. This soul force was too powerful. It filled his body and felt very real. He had never thought that his soul force would become so powerful one day. Chapter 5:28. Let's go and take a look, Noah said with a smile as he led Mary towards the huge triangular tower. Since he has already reached the sacred domain, then, I have to tell him about that matter. Ron's pornographic novel. In his sea of consciousness, there was a huge soul body that looked like an indomitable giant. The body that was formed by soul power was very thick and solid. It looked no different from a real person. His body was covered by a layer of membrane. Beneath his feet was a huge sea of consciousness. The black seawater that was constantly churning was a vast and boundless soul power. Ron quietly scanned his own body. He could only feel that his soul power had reached an extremely large level. This enormous soul power was like an inexhaustible treasure trove. No matter how he squandered it, it was endless. At the same time, with his powerful soul power, even his six senses had become extremely sensitive. Ron expanded his spiritual senses. Within a radius of 10 miles, he could see everything. The birds in the distance were screaming and flapping their small wings. On the ground, a group of ants was slowly crawling. With a sweep of his spiritual senses, he didn't even miss a single thing. Sacred domain. This is the power of the sacred domain. Ron felt the surging soul power. A strong sense of pride and confidence welled up in his heart. He felt that everything was under his control. At this moment, Ron's heart moved. He planned to tell this news to his most respected and beloved Grandpa Hamelin. Ron's consciousness entered the soul ring and searched for traces of Hamelin. His consciousness entered the soul ring in the form of a soul and arrived in front of the huge palace of bones. It didn't take much effort for him to enter. Ron came in front of the huge crystal coffin. When he opened it, he was stunned. His eyes were wide open. The crystal coffin was empty. Where's Grandpa Hamelin? Ron was shocked. He searched the entire hall but didn't find any trace of Homeland's grandpa. At this moment, he saw Noah and Mary slowly walking into the triangular hall. Could it be? Ron was shocked. He remembered that before he fainted, Grandpa Homeland had been fine, but after he fainted, Ron could not help but be suspicious. Lord Noah, Miss Mary. Ron's spiritual sense returned to his body. He immediately stood up and bowed deeply to the two. Noah smiled. Ron, congratulations. Mary also smiled. Congratulations on becoming a powerhouse of the sacred domain. Of course, I have to thank Lord Noah for his help, Ron said modestly. His mind was spinning rapidly, thinking about how to tell Noah the doubts in his heart. Unexpectedly, Noah laughed. Hee, Ron, it's good that you've become a powerhouse of the sacred domain. I'm just about to do something. Ron, come with me. Ron was puzzled, but he still followed Noah out of the triangular tower. On a luxurious bed, a thin and weak figure was lying there. He was wearing a black necromancer's robe. His eyes were closed, as if he was asleep. This was an old man that he did not recognize at all. His face was somewhat similar to Homeland's. His skin was white with a hint of wrinkles, and the veins on his thin hands were exposed. They gave off a cold feeling. Although his eyes were closed, there was a hint of red on his face. Surprisingly, he was breathing weakly. The person lying on the bed was actually a living person. Lord Noah, what's going on? Ron raised his head and looked at Noah with a questioning gaze. Noah smiled and said, After you fell unconscious, I discovered another soul in your soul. It's the teacher who taught you necromancy, Sir Homeland. I talked with him for a long time, and he told me many things. Noah pushed up his glasses. Logically speaking, with Sir Homeland's strength, he could have used some method to take over your body, but he didn't, Noah smiled. It's obvious that he treats you well. Ron's eyes were a little moist. Grandfather Homeland had always been watching his growth, teaching him necromancy, waiting for him to become stronger day by day. He was even willing to sacrifice his own life to protect him. How could he be described as, well? As for taking over Ron's body, Homeland would never do such a thing. Sir Homeland has always wanted to rebuild the Scourge Church and restore the former glory of the Scourge Church. This has always been his wish. And this wish. Noah glanced at Ron and said, as the successor of the Scourge Church, he hopes that you will be the one to complete it. He made 2 requests to me. The first was for me to help you increase your strength, to at least reach the sacred domain. The second was for me to find a suitable body for him to resurrect. I agreed to both of his requests, Noah said with a smile on his face. Ron took a deep breath. He now understood everything. It turned out that Grandfather Homeland had always been helping him. Ron gently grabbed the hand of the unfamiliar Homeland, tears streaming down his face. That unfamiliar body had a trace of warmth, as if it was in a deep sleep. After a while, Ron gently wiped his eyes. Lord Noah, when will Grandfather Homeland wake up? I separated Homeland's soul from your body, then found a body that was compatible with him in all aspects to resurrect him. Everything went smoothly, but he will need some time to adapt to this new body. During this time, he will be in a deep sleep. Noah said. Ron, don't worry. He is very safe here. Noah smiled. Thank you, Lord Noah. Ron sighed in relief and sincerely thanked Noah. Go. Ron, do what you should do. Noah waved his hand and said, Perhaps when your teacher wakes up and sees that you have achieved his wish, he will be very happy. I will definitely. Ron stood up and replied, his dark eyes shining with determination. On the bustling street, all kinds of people were shuttling back and forth. Among them were mercenaries and merchants. Most of the people walking on the street were mercenaries in a hurry. They were travel-worn, and no one was willing to look back. On the window displays on both sides of the street, there were women who were selling their look. They were gorgeously dressed, making flirtatious gestures, and were placed there for people to admire like merchandise. Under the display window, a beggar was kneeling on the ground, holding a broken bowl in his shabby clothes, forming a strong contrast with the beautiful women on the display window. This was a world of money. Here, hundreds of quests would be issued every day. There were all kinds of quests to choose from. There were easy ones, normal ones, and difficult ones. Every minute here, there would be over 1 million gold coins being traded. Some were even interplanar missions. These missions could only be completed after leaving the Noah continent. Of course, interplanar missions weren't something that anyone could do. At the very least, one needed the strength of the sacred domain. This was the headquarters of the mercenary union. Ron didn't know where Noah lived. Only after leaving his residence did he find out that Lord Noah lived in the headquarters of the mercenary union. However, Noah's residence had been designated as a forbidden area and was heavily guarded. Others couldn't easily enter. Ron learned from Mary that Lord Noah was the actual controller of the mercenary union. Many interplanar missions were issued by him. Even some powerhouses of the sacred domain or the divine domain had to accept missions from him. Of course, the rewards for these missions weren't calculated in gold coins. They were transactions between black crystal coins. The amount involved in these transactions was enormous. Therefore, everyone on the Noah continent would give some face to the mercenary union, including fairy dragon Frigga and dark dragon Firth of the Parliament. Of course, Noah was also a businessman. He also sold some things. The interplanar store was his property. Every item sold in the store was of the highest quality. Moreover, they were all priced in black crystal coins. Ordinary people couldn't afford them. Noah would issue missions, and when someone completed them, they would turn in the mission items and earn the difference in price. Then, he would sell the highest quality goods. Many of the black crystal coins earned from issuing missions would return to his hands after a round. The interplanar store might be small, but in terms of wealth, the entire continent couldn't compare to it. "I'll see you off here. Ron, take care," Mary said with a smile as she led Ron out of the restricted area and arrived at the plaza of the mercenary union. "Thank you, Mary. I'm indebted to you for taking care of me all this time." Ron smiled and bowed, bidding her farewell. Ron strolled along the streets of the mercenary union, looking at the bustling main road. He seemed a little absent-minded. Even though his strength had reached the level of the sacred domain, when faced with the heavy responsibility of rebuilding the Scourge Church, as well as the request from Grandpa Homelin, he always felt a sense of helplessness. He had no money, no land, and only Ron was all alone. How was he going to establish a huge force? He couldn't just point at a random building and say that it was the Scourge Church, could he? Ron's head hurt from thinking about it. Forget it, let's not worry about this for now. Should I still go to Dragon Island to see my mother? Ron sighed and thought silently. Thump! Ron accidentally bumped into a human mercenary. The large human mercenary saw that Ron was a young lad and assumed that he wasn't very strong. He glared at him and took a stance as he scolded, "Damn it, you brat, don't you look where you're going, I'm sorry." Ron knew that he was in the wrong and took the initiative to apologize. However, that person still didn't let him go. He was still scolding and looking like he was about to attack. "Hee, this brat is in trouble." One of the surrounding mercenaries gloated. "That person is a great swordsman, right? Look at how smug he is." Another mercenary was a little dissatisfied. "Tell me, how do you want to compensate?" the large mercenary said fiercely. Ron didn't have time to argue with him. He shrugged and his body became light as he rose up. "Damn it, don't even think about leaving." The large mercenary had just started cursing when he swallowed it back down. At this moment, his mouth was wide open in shock as he looked at Ron, who was floating in the air in disbelief. Sacred Domain Powerhouse? Looking at Ron, who was floating in the air, even the stupidest person knew what was going on. None of the surrounding mercenaries would have thought that this young lad, who looked like he was 17 or 18 years old, was actually a powerful powerhouse from the sacred domain. It's over. That large guy is dead for sure. One of the surrounding mercenaries shook his head helplessly with a look of pity. Those young powerhouses from the sacred domain were mostly young and hot-blooded. They were passionate about showing off their strength and would kill without a word. The large guy saw this and knelt down. "Sir, please spare my life. Sir, please spare my life. This lowly one has old and young to take care of," that guy cried as he slapped himself heavily in the face. When that fellow cried bitterly and begged for mercy, he found that Ron had already quietly left at some point. He actually left? The surrounding mercenaries were shocked. Some of them saw that there was no more drama to watch and directly left. Huff, huff, that large mercenary powerlessly sat on the ground. His clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. His calves were still trembling. Just a moment ago, he felt that he had already taken a trip to hell. Now that he escaped, he secretly rejoiced. Ron didn't bicker with him. Instead, he turned around and floated away. If he wanted to kill that great swordsman mercenary, it would be very easy, but he didn't do so. Although Ron had the strength of the sacred domain, he didn't use it to compete with others. He also didn't use it to act cool and bully others. His mind was much more mature than the average youth of his age. Powerful soul force covered his whole body. Ron's body turned into a black fog and flashed through the sky like a meteor. His goal was Dragon Island. Chapter 529. Dragon Island was a small continent that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was surrounded by the sea on all sides, and the central mountain range continued to extend outwards. Other than the dragons living on the island, there were also many other residents. They were all the family members of the guards on the island. There were also many fishermen living on the few scattered islands around the island. Ron stood in the sky of Dragon Island, feeling the vastness of Dragon Island. A slight cool breeze brushed his robe. Black Dragon Cliff, this was the place where his mother lived. Ron had been there once before, and he would never forget it. Ron muttered to himself for a moment, thinking that it would be better to meet his mother secretly. It would be best not to alarm others. At this moment, his figure moved slightly and disappeared in the sky in an instant. Ron was flying towards the direction of Black Dragon Cliff at high speed. At this moment, his heart suddenly trembled. He felt as if he had triggered some kind of mechanism, waking up Dragon Island. Ron had triggered Dragon Island's defense restriction. In the sky above Dragon Island, some dragon ancestor had laid down a powerful magic circle. As long as someone broke into Dragon Island, a pornographic novel would be triggered. The magic circle would send out an alarm. The whole Dragon Island was shaking. Someone is trespassing on Dragon Island. It's a sacred domain expert. Quickly take off. The guards on Dragon Island received the alarm. The Dragon Knights didn't dare to be negligent. They rode on the winged dragonhawks and flew into the sky. The Dragon Knights riding on the Earth Dragons also quickly gathered. Who are you, trespassing on Dragon Island? Don't you know that Dragon Island is a forbidden area in Noah continent? Dozens of winged dragonhawks rose into the sky and surrounded Ron. One must know that they were facing a powerful expert from the sacred domain, but thinking that they had the backing of the most powerful force in Noah continent. Dragons, that Dragon Knight's courage was boosted again. Dragon Knight? Ron smiled faintly. With his current strength, he no longer put Dragon Knight and the like in his eyes. It would be more appropriate to change to Dragon Knight. He immediately said coldly, I want to see my mother, all of you get out of my way. I'm sorry, Your Excellency Ron. I have a duty to fulfill. Without the order of the Dragon's Elder, I can't let you pass. The leading Dragon Knight finally recognized the person who had come. He knew about Ron's past, so he replied cautiously. In fact, Homelin had wreaked havoc on the Dragon Island as Ron. He had almost defeated the dragon clan's patriarch Firth, so it was hard not to remember him. He, Ron sneered. Then, he lifted his black cloak, and revealed the gray soft armor underneath. If that's the case, I can only force my way in. Ron said in a deep voice, "Do you think you can stop me?" Swish. Dozens of dragon spears were aimed at Ron. The faces of the dragon knights were covered in cold sweat, and they looked as if they were facing death with equanimity. Everyone knew that the result of fighting against the powerhouses of the sacred domain was death. However, they had no other choice. During this time, more and more winged dragon knights had gathered. Almost half of the dragon island had moved. Just as Ron was about to make his move, suddenly dozens of spiritual senses swept over and firmly locked onto him. Ron knew that he had alarmed the powerhouses of the dragons. Spiritual senses locking onto him meant that they already knew of his arrival. Ordinary professionals also had spiritual senses. However, their spiritual senses could not reach far. On the other hand, the spiritual senses of powerhouses of the sacred domain could extend for dozens of kilometers. Ron also noticed that two spiritual senses swept over from hundreds of kilometers away. However, Ron quickly guessed who the owners of these two spiritual senses were. One was the dark dragon Firth, the dragon clan's patriarch, and the other was the fairy dragon Frigga. Only these two powerhouses of the divine realm had such ability. Ron's heart suddenly tightened. Things were going to be a little troublesome now. Just as Ron was thinking about how to deal with it, he found that the two spiritual senses quickly moved away. He did not feel the slightest hostility from them. Immediately after, several spiritual senses also gave up monitoring him. The expected trouble did not appear. Including R.A. Firth, they seemed to ignore Ron's arrival. "What's going on?" Ron frowned. He was a little surprised. The dragons had always been strong. When did the tyrannical R.A. Firth become so easy to talk to? However, the other members of the dragons were not so obedient. At this time, he saw a small black dot growing bigger in front of him. Ron knew that trouble was coming. "Ron, I didn't expect you to have the face to come back." The one who appeared in front of Ron was the young powerhouse of the Flame Dragon clan, Ranarier. At this moment, he stood in front of Ron in his human form and said coldly, "Lord Ranarier." The dragon knights in the sky covered their chests with their hands and bowed slightly. When they saw Ranarier appear, they breathed a sigh of relief. Their eyes were full of gratitude. If no one cared, they were afraid that they would have been sacrificed here. Surrounded by hundreds of dragons, including Ranarier, Ron's face still did not change. He said proudly, "Haha, don't talk nonsense, Ranarier. Don't forget that I am a foreign dragon who passed the assessment. Why can't I come back?" "Foreign dragons? Haha, don't make me laugh to death. Ron, your qualification as a foreign dragon has not been officially recognized by the dragons. It is regarded as giving up your qualification." Ranarier smiled slightly. "Joss. Dragon Eagle Joss, you remember, right? He is the level 15 magical beast you defeated. He has officially joined the foreign dragons." "Ha ha!" Ron laughed heartily. His robes fluttered like the wind, emitting a powerful pressure that scared the dragon knights so much that their faces turned ashen. "What a good joke. I didn't expect you to let a loser join the dragons. Sure enough, are you dragons the world of losers?" Ron retorted sarcastically. "Presumptuous." Ranarier was angry. "Ron, I know that you have some fortuitous encounter and become a powerhouse of the sacred domain. But this does not mean that you have the qualifications to be arrogant. In the eyes of us dragons, the powerhouses of the sacred domain are nothing, haha, is that so?" Ron sneered. "To be honest, I don't care much about that bullshit foreign dragons. My purpose is simply to see my mother, you. You." Ranarier trembled with anger. When had he ever heard of someone daring to insult the dragons? It was precisely because he had never heard of it that he was greatly provoked. His face sank slightly, and he coldly shouted, "Since you won't let me go, then I can only use my own strength to achieve my goal." A while had passed, and besides Ranarier, the other dragons had not come over. Ron had already calculated that Firth, dragons, and the other dragons had already given up on interfering in this matter. Since that was the case, he wanted to teach Ranarier a good lesson. Of course, going too far wouldn't do. Ron had no intention of killing him. At this time, a sacred tool appeared in Ron's hand as if by magic. It was the dragon bone staff. Ranarier sneered. "Ron, you are too naive. How could a new sacred domain powerhouse like you be my opponent? But since you want to die, I can only fulfill your wish." "Is that so? You'll have to try to find out." Ron was full of confidence. Roar. With an earth-shattering roar, Ranarier's body underwent a huge change. A mass of flames instantly spread out, and in the blazing heat, Ranarier turned into a huge flaming dragon. A powerful aura spread out, and raging flames covered the sky. The dragon opened its mouth, flapped its huge wings, and spat out a mouthful of blazing gas. "Ron, today I will clean house for the dragons. I will kill you, a disgrace with a lowly human bloodline." Ranarier let out a low roar and flapped his wings, bringing a blazing and strong wind with him. He suddenly rushed towards Ron like a huge fireball. Although he hadn't arrived yet, the blazing flames had already scorched the surrounding area. Seeing the two sacred domain powerhouses make a move, the surrounding dragon knights scattered. Once Ranarier arrived, there was nothing for them to do. In a battle between sacred domain powerhouses, they couldn't interfere at all. This was not the first time Ron had faced Ranarier. He wasn't afraid when he was weak, so he was even less afraid now. He smiled coldly, and his body shook, turning into a cloud of smoke and disappearing into the air. Ron's speed was very fast, especially after advancing to the sacred domain. He easily dodged Ranarier's attack. Purring! The dragon claw pounced, but Ranarier grabbed nothing but air. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and flapped his wings again, rushing towards Ron's direction. A soul-stirring chase was staged in the sky above the dragon island. The huge red flying dragon was chasing after that little figure that looked like a cloud of smoke. That little figure was like an illusion. It was incomparably nimble. Ranarier missed his target several times. "Say, do you think Sir Ranarier can defeat Ron?" a winged dragon knight quietly asked. The captain shook his head. "I don't know, but the situation doesn't seem optimistic." "Don't run if you have the guts." Ranarier was flustered and exasperated. He launched several attacks in a row, but Ron easily dodged them all. He roared and opened his mouth to spit out a dragon breath with flames. "Hee hee." Ron smiled faintly. He waved his right hand lightly, and a dark smoke twisted like a snake and condensed in front of him. "White bone shield!" Boom! The flaming dragon breath collided with the white bone shield. The flaming dragon breath seemed to have been blocked. The sound of an explosion spread out, and flames covered the whole sky. "What? He actually blocked my attack?" Ranarier was astonished and somewhat in disbelief, but he couldn't help but believe what he saw. At this time, Ron's long laughter came to his ears. "Ranarier, since you are so sincere, then I'll let you see my true strength now." As soon as his voice fell, the dragon bone staff in Ron's hand was seen in the center. The black robe on his body fluttered with the wind, revealing the ferocious skull of the bone shield. The eyes of the dragon head of the sacred tool, dragon bone staff, emitted a faint green light, like a vengeful spirit awakened in hell, emitting an astonishing soul power. White bone spear. Ron's eyes turned dark green, and a bone spear as bright as white jade appeared in his hand at some point. The next moment, he threw the bone spear fiercely at Ranarier. Fire shield. Ranarier didn't dare to be careless. He immediately raised a powerful fire shield to protect his body. Several shields condensed like flames appeared around his huge body, constantly rotating. Boom! The white bone spear attacked, carrying a powerful soul power. Ranaria's surroundings scattered like smoke, suddenly covering half of the sky. Although he had blocked Ron's attack, Ranaria only felt a strong surge of energy. He felt a sweet taste in his throat, and a trace of blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. With just one counterattack, the tyrannical Ranaria was injured. Chapter 530. Boom! The black fog exploded like dust, and the smoke filled everyone's eyes. For a moment, everyone's vision was blocked. When they came back to their senses, they found that Ron had already left at some point. Ron did not fight to the death with Ranaria, but chose to escape. In fact, his choice was wise. If he really made a big deal out of it, he would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. As the strongest race in Noah, the dragons were not to be trifled with. Just because they ignored Ron did not mean that they were afraid of him. Swish! A round of flames flashed, but Ranaria had already returned to his human form and landed on the ground. He looked in the direction that Ron had left, his eyes full of resentment. At this moment, there was still a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. With just this move, Ranaria had suffered a hidden loss. Lord Ranaria! Lord Ranaria! A group of dragon knights also landed on the ground on their winged dragons. They surrounded him and sincerely saluted him. If it were not for Ranaria's sudden appearance, many of them would have been seriously injured, if not dead. Lord Ranaria, are your injuries okay? A dragon knight saw that there was still blood at the corner of Ranaria's mouth and asked. His words were originally out of concern, but unfortunately, it just happened to touch Ranaria's reverse scale. As soon as the dragon knight's voice fell, a trace of anger appeared in Ranaria's eyes. Slap! The dragon knight who spoke received a heavy slap. The slap was so heavy that half of the dragon knight's face swelled up. The dragon knight who was beaten covered his face tightly, tears welling up in his eyes. His face was full of grievances, and he did not dare to say a word. The others did not dare to breathe, and could only look at him sympathetically. Ranaria jumped up in anger, pointed at the guy and cursed, "Bastard! Do you have the guts to say it again? Say it again? Who the hell said I was injured? With my strength, how could I be injured by a human? What a joke!" Yes, Lord, I was wrong. The dragon knight could only apologize in tears. Scram! All of you scram! Ranaria was somewhat hysterical. Being defeated by a human in front of so many people, his self-esteem was seriously damaged. Yes, Lord Ranaria. Then I won't disturb Lord Ranaria. Lord Ranaria, goodbye. Hearing this, the dragon knights in their hearts, and they all bowed and bid farewell, and then scattered like birds and beasts. The dragon knights had all scattered. Ranarly was the only one left standing on the small slope. His face was ashen as he looked at the sky with resentment. He gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. Ranaria, remember this for me. Today I..." Ron didn't have the chance to hear Renali's resentment. He had already appeared at Black Dragon Cliff. Mom. Ranaria. Before they arrived at Black Dragon Cliff, Bellis had already sensed Ron's arrival through her spiritual sense. When she suddenly saw Ron in perfect condition, her tears fell with a swish sound. "Mother, it's good that you're okay." Ron's face was full of excitement when he saw Bellis, and he suddenly threw himself into Bellis's arms. "Silly child, what could have happened to your mother?" Bellis hugged Ron tightly, her face full of excitement, and with a hint of sobbing, she said, "But you, Mother thought I would never see you again." Bellis couldn't continue, and tears flowed down her beautiful cheeks. Ron gently wiped away the tears on his mother's face and said wittily, "Mother, isn't your son already back?" "Yes. You're back, my good son is back." Bellis was amused by Ron, and her tears turned into laughter. Come, come. Child, come in, let mother take a good look at you. Bellis smiled and pulled Ron into the palace she lived in. Dragon Island was very big, so the buildings inside were also very big. Ron walked into the place where Bellis lived, and it was like a maze. If not for his mother pulling him, Ron would have already lost his way. While talking to Ron, Bellis tightly held onto Ron's hand, unwilling to let go for even a moment, as if she was afraid that if she let go, Ron would fly away. After several twists and turns, they arrived at a luxuriously decorated hall. The mother and son sat down on a chair and started chatting. Ron, where have you been all this time? Mother was worried to death. Bellis squeezed Ron's hand and asked nervously. It's nothing, Mother, I'm fine. That person saved me, and even healed my injuries. Ron smiled and briefly recounted the process. Of course, he omitted Noah's name. Before he left, Noah kept a close eye on him and did not tell anyone about his existence. Who was the middle-aged man who took you away? Bellis asked. She tried hard to recall the scene at that time, and the more she thought about it, the more she felt that the person's identity was not simple. A person who could calm down the furious Firth and give him some face. His identity was naturally not that simple. However, that person seemed to be a human, a genuine human. I'm sorry, Mother. Ron lowered his head slightly, and said with a trace of apology, I promised him not to reveal his existence. If you promise someone something, you must do it. Hearing this, Besley smiled. That's right, Ron. You did the right thing in this matter. She paused and said, Since you promised him, then Mother won't ask you any more. Being praised by his mother, Ron felt warm in his heart. He thought for a while and asked, By the way, Mother, that old dirty novel, did that guy make things difficult for you? Old guy? Bellis opened her beautiful dark eyes wide, puzzled. After thinking for a long time, she realized that Ron was talking about Lawfirth. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. Ron, don't say that. He's my father, and also your grandfather. I don't have such a grandfather. Speaking of Lawfirth, Ron was furious. Have you ever seen a grandfather who killed his own grandson? Anyway, I haven't seen it. If it weren't for the fact that I can't beat him, I would have taught him a lesson when I came back this time. He waved his fist, his face full of anger. Bellis sighed in her heart. To be honest, she was also very dissatisfied with her father. How could a grandfather kill his own grandson over and over again? Ron's anger was also reasonable. At this moment, Ron looked at Bellis and said seriously, Mother, tell me the truth. Did he make things difficult for you after I left? No. Bellis smiled and said, After you were taken away, I returned to Black Dragon Cliff and have been there ever since. That's good. Ron breathed a sigh of relief and said fiercely, If I find out that he did something bad to you, even if I can't beat him now, I will definitely not let him go in the future. Don't say that, Ron. Bellis smiled and said softly, Moreover, after that time, I could feel that my father's attitude changed a lot. Bellis smiled. Do you think he doesn't know that you're on Dragon Island? No, he knows, but he didn't stop you from coming in. This is already very clear. He has changed a lot. Bellis continued, Just 2 days ago, he specially sent someone to pass a message to me, saying that my confinement order has been lifted. That means I can go anywhere. Bellis said quietly, I understand what he means. That is, he's giving me a chance to see Pluto, who is your father, but I haven't decided to see him yet. Ron's eyes widened in surprise. Mother, if you have the chance to see Father, why don't you go? Do you know that Father misses you very much? I know, of course I know. Bellis cried softly again. Her voice trembled as she said, But I don't dare to see him. If it wasn't for me, because of my family, how could he have become like this? I've let him down. Ron could only comfort his mother. However, no matter how Ron persuaded her, Bellis still refused to see Pluto. Finally, Bellis said, Ron, it's not that I don't want to see him, It's just that the time isn't right. I still don't know what Father thinks. Mother is scared, really scared, scared that the family will bring him more trouble. Ron, do you understand what I mean? Bellis knew that perhaps there was a slight change in her father's views, but it did not mean that all the dragons would accept this change. It did not matter to humans if a human became a descendant of dragons, but to dragons it was not a good thing. Whether it was power, magic, or talent, humans were far inferior to dragons. In this regard, the dragons were at a disadvantage. Furthermore, the power of tradition was powerful. Even the leader of the dragon tribe couldn't do as he pleased. More importantly, this culture couldn't be allowed to grow within the dragon tribe. If this was the case, every dragon tribe would find an ordinary human or a lower race to mate with and covet their offspring, then the dragon tribe's pure bloodline would eventually die out. Therefore, dragons were very careful when choosing a mate. Generally speaking, only dragons could be chosen. The worst ones were high-level magical beasts. As for humans, it was impossible. Perhaps Ron was an exception. Oh. Ron finally understood and said, "Then? Mother, I'll tell him." Bellis smiled and untied a necklace from her neck. The necklace was very ordinary, but there was a crystal-clear blue gem on it. She put the necklace in Ron's hand and said, "This is an anti-magic necklace. It's also Mother's personal item. Bring this to your father and tell him. Mother will be reunited with him soon." "Yes, Mother." Ron took the necklace and nodded seriously. After seeing that his mother was fine, Ron finally felt relieved. He bid farewell to his mother and left the Black Dragon Cliff. In the sky, Ron's body floated quietly. He gently touched the necklace in his hand and felt the magical power contained in it. The necklace was warm, and there was still a trace of body heat. After a long time, Ron sighed softly and slowly put the necklace in his pocket. After seeing his mother this time, his heart was even heavier. "Forget it, let's not think about it for now. Let's leave here first." Ron shook his head. His body turned into a cloud of light mist and was about to leave. Suddenly, his heart moved as if he thought of something. "That's right, the floating island. Isn't the floating island known as the ancient ruins in the Dragon Island?" Ron finally remembered. He saw a few illustrations in a library, which aroused his curiosity. Ron had long wanted to take a look at this place known as the ancient ruins. Since he came to the Dragon Island and those arrogant dragons did not stop him, wasn't this a good opportunity? Chapter 531. The size of the Dragon Island is beyond Ron's expectation, and the endless ocean outside of the Dragon Island is even more beyond his imagination. The endless ocean takes the meaning of endless. No one has ever been able to reach the edge. And according to legend, the end of the endless ocean is connected to another space. Ron does not care about these. What he is most concerned about is how to find the ancient ruins on the scroll, the floating island. Unfortunately, Ron searched all the islands around the Dragon Island, but not a single one of them is floating in the air. Facing these hundreds and thousands of islands scattered all over the place, Ron cannot help but feel worried. Without any other choice, Ron can only ask the fishermen nearby for help. The afternoon sun shines on the beach, making the entire beach scalding hot. In the calm harbor, on a dilapidated fishing boat, an old fisherman is smoking a hookah, enjoying this rare leisure time. The old fisherman half squints his eyes, as if he is dozing off. He seems to be reminiscing about the youth that has disappeared for a long time. At this moment, a voice interrupts his thoughts. "Hello, old uncle, can I ask you something?" The old fisherman opens his eyes, only to see a young man wearing a black robe standing in front of him. A pair of black eyes is looking at him kindly, with an inquiring expression on his face. When the old fisherman sees that it is a young lad, he also lets down his guard. He smiles warmly and stands up. A guest from afar, what do you want to ask? In this area of the sea, there is nothing that I do not know." The old fisherman smiles amicably. He is not boasting. He has lived here all his life. Nothing in this area of the sea can escape from him. Really? That's great. That young man in black robe is precisely Ron. When he heard, his eyes lit up. He finally found the right person. He hurriedly asks, "Then, old uncle, do you know where the floating island is?" Floating island. Of course I know, this floating island. The old fisherman smiles as he says, his mind is spinning rapidly. Floating island, why is this name so familiar? Could it be? At this moment the old fisherman suddenly seems to recall something. His face changes and says loudly, "What, you are asking about floating island? Don't know. Don't know. I don't know." The old fisherman said, "I don't know" 3 times in a row. He stood up, and frustration was written all over his face. "Uncle, you!" Ron was shocked. He did not expect the old man's face to suddenly change. Ron felt that the old man knew about it, but why didn't he say anything? At this moment, the old fisherman had already stood up and angrily pushed Ron out. "Just leave. What floating island? Don't ask me. I don't know anything." After saying this, the old fisherman pushed Ron out of the door and closed the door with a bang. "Uncle, uncle." Ron knocked on the door a few times and called out a few times. Unfortunately, the old man ignored him. Ron could only sigh and walk down the stairs step by step of the old wooden boat. He turned around and saw that not only was the door of the old man's boat tightly shut, even the curtains were drawn. "Forget it, I'll ask someone else," Ron thought helplessly. He did not expect that it would cause such a huge reaction from the old man. But things were so strange. Those simple fishermen were polite to Ron at the beginning, but when they heard Ron ask about floating island, their faces changed drastically, as if they had seen a ghost. Their faces were filled with fear, and they quickly walked away, avoiding answering Ron's question. Some even refused to let him in, which made Ron rather depressed. What's going on? Strolling on the beach that was scorching hot from the sun, Ron scratched his head. Why does everyone have the same expression, but they don't say anything? They must know something. Ron thought and stopped walking, coming to a conclusion. But how could he get them to say it? Looks like I can only use some unconventional methods. At this moment, Ron's eyes flashed as he thought silently. He stared at a fisherman's family not far away. Bang! In a dilapidated house, the rotten door was kicked open by someone. A person was ruthlessly thrown out and fell to the ground. It was a tall middle-aged man. At this moment, he was rolling on the ground like a gourd. Although it seemed that the force was great, the middle-aged man did not suffer any injuries. He had been fishing all year round, so his body was very strong. The person who threw him was a young man in a black robe. Needless to say, it was Ron. At this moment, he used a black cloth to cover his face, and then secretly grabbed the middle-aged man. The house was very dark and filled with the pungent smell of fish. It was very unpleasant. Through the dilapidated ceiling, the sunlight shone into the dark house, adding a bit of gloominess. This was a house used by fishermen to dry their fish. It was located in a remote area, and people rarely came here. The man who was thrown in by Ron had a face full of horror. He crawled up, knelt on the ground, and cried bitterly. "Sir, respected sir, I am just a poor fisherman. I can't take out any money. I still have a wife and children to support. Sir, please be kind and let me go." The middle-aged man desperately begged for mercy. He thought that Ron was a pirate who committed all kinds of crimes. "Shut up!" Ron shouted sternly, and the middle-aged man immediately dared not to make a sound. But when the man heard Ron's voice, he felt a little strange. This pirate's age did not seem to be very old. Ron coldly snorted, and slowly reached out his hand to feel around his waist. The middle-aged man looked, and his heart suddenly sank. He wants to kill people? But the middle-aged man was wrong. With a crash, the young man raised his hand, and a yellow light sprinkled in front of his eyes. One by one, gold coins fell to the ground, jumping like rabbit. Gold coins. So many gold coins. The middle-aged man's eyes were straight. He had never seen so much money. Ron coldly said, "Answer my question, and these gold coins are yours. Otherwise, humph." Ron coldly snorted, and the middle-aged man's body trembled. At this time, he had confirmed that the young man in front of him was not a pirate. He was relieved and asked, "Sir, what do you want to know?" "As long as I know, I will tell you everything I know." "Good. Very good." Seeing that the guy was so cooperative, Ron nodded with satisfaction. He looked at the middle-aged man. "Then tell me, where is the floating island?" "Floating island?" The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, his face showed a look of fear. This. Sir, speak," Ron coldly shouted. He raised his voice, and at the same time stepped forward. "Speak. Otherwise I'll kill you." Ron released the might of a sacred domain expert, causing the middle-aged man to feel as if he was facing the threat of death. His body trembled as he broke out in cold sweat. "Sir, I'll speak. Don't kill me." Only then did Ron withdraw his pressure. He tidied up his clothes and said casually, "Say it. I hope I'm satisfied with what you say." "Yes, sir." The middle-aged man looked at the gold coins on the ground and swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He gritted his teeth and said, "Sir, actually, all the fishermen in this area know the location of this floating island. It's just that they usually don't talk about it because that place has always been known as pornographic novels since ancient times. Come, this is a place full of taboos." "A place full of taboos?" Ron silently repeated these words. Only now did he understand why those fishermen were so afraid to avoid him. "Go on," Ron said in a deep voice. "Although I've never been there before, I've heard from the elders that, although that place usually looks calm, as long as someone goes near it, there will immediately be earth-shattering changes. The clear sky will turn dark, as if death is shrouding the earth. The wind will surge and countless lightning bolts will fall. Whirlwinds will blow on the sea and the sea will boil. That floating island above the endless sea is like the devil's eye." The middle-aged man's face was filled with fear. When he spoke of the things passed down by the fishermen, his body couldn't help but tremble. How could this be? Ron frowned. This news was greatly out of his expectations. However, this also strengthened his determination to make a trip there. The middle-aged man glanced at Ron. "Sir, that place is full of taboos and is extremely dangerous. I think it's better if you don't go. Besides, there's nothing worth risking your life over there." "You don't have to worry about that." Ron took a deep breath and said calmly, "You just have to tell me where that floating island is. It's about 1,000 kilometers to the east of the sea. There are very few islands there, so it's very easy to find." The middle-aged man swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said with a bitter smile, "We fishermen never dare to fish there, Ron finally knew the approximate location of the floating island. He nodded with satisfaction. "You can go now." "Thank you, sir." The middle-aged man heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to leave, Ron called out to him, "Take the gold coins on the ground with you." The middle-aged man originally wanted to take them but didn't dare to. Hearing this, he was overjoyed. "Thank you, sir, for your reward." As he spoke, he happily picked up the gold coins on the ground and carefully placed them in his arms. He then thanked Ron, bowed, and walked out of the door. Just as the middle-aged man was about to walk to the door, he suddenly seemed to remember something. He turned around and said, "Oh right, sir, I remember now. According to us fishermen, this floating island is actually not called Floating Island. It has another name." "What name?" Ron frowned and asked. "It's called Death Island." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he left. Only Ron was left standing quietly in the dilapidated wooden house. Chapter 532. The Taboo Ocean was also known as the Ocean of Death by the fishermen around Dragon Island. It was located in Normanson, a part of Dragon Island. Ron had always thought that the middle-aged man's words were extremely exaggerated, but he soon realized that he was wrong. Ron was like a flying seagull, flying close to the surface of the ocean. His body streaked across the ocean, leaving behind a shallow trail. Ron continued to advance towards the east. Suddenly, he felt his heart twitch, and a suffocating feeling was transmitted. Ron's heart thumped, and he opened his eyes wide in astonishment. What is this? The scenery in front of his eyes suddenly changed. The originally calm ocean suddenly became turbulent, and the sky became dark. Not long after, it was completely dark, as if the day had suddenly turned into night. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, as thick as a water bucket continuously struck down. On the ocean, huge waves more than 10 feet high were raised. Ron was at a loss. At this time, a huge wave came crashing down. Ron hurriedly dodged to the side, dodging the attack of the huge wave. This is... Suddenly, Ron's eyes lit up. In the pitch-black night sky, he discovered something sparkling with black radiance. Floating island. That small island seemed to be gently supported by an invisible force, quietly floating in the sky. What was different was that this small island was unceasingly emitting a thick black fog, enveloping the entire island. This place was filled with the aura of death. Before Ron even got close, he already felt a burst of palpitations. It really is the island of death. No wonder those fishermen were unwilling to come. Ron took a deep breath. In the darkness, his eyes flickered. He didn't know why, but this surging death energy gave him a kind of familiar feeling. Let's go and take a look. With a thought, Ron's figure slowly rose up, slowly approaching the floating island. The closer he got to this strange island, the faster Ron's heart beat. The feeling of death enveloping his head became more and more intense, as if there was a sword raised to chop down his neck at any time. Ron plunged into the black fog. Stepping on solid ground, Ron's heart calmed down. The island was covered in a thick black fog, and he couldn't see the road ahead clearly. Ron took out a magic stone from his interspatial bag. Through the weak light from the magic stone, he could finally see a little more clearly. He slowly moved forward and soon saw a dark hole. Ron didn't think too much and stepped in. Once they entered the cave, Ron could finally see the interior of the cave with the help of the faint light from the Philosopher's Stone. They were huge illustrations that looked as if they had been chiseled out with a knife and axe. The lines were smooth, and even after tens of thousands of years, the colors did not fade at all. These were the illustrations that Ron had seen in the library. A huge human figure with a skeletal face was being worshipped by tens of thousands of people. These humans seemed to have just been freed from the stage of eating raw meat and drinking blood. They only knew how to use crude weapons to fight against powerful magical beasts. Ron now knew that the huge human figure was the Lich King. He came to Amroth and taught the humans their necromancy magic. He led them on expeditions and finally created the powerful Scourge Church. The powerful Scourge Church ruled over the continent of Amroth for thousands of years. Following the disappearance of the Lich King, the Scourge Church began to decline. Various races and forces began to rebel, including the human Holy See. Ron looked at them one by one. Finally, his gaze fell on a corner at the bottom of the wall. Ron saw something. It was a book wrapped in a thick black cover. Ron picked up the book and carefully examined it. It was a book that described the basics of necromancy magic. It was called Necromancy Magic, the Basics. Unfortunately, only the second volume was available. The first volume was missing, and even the second volume was incomplete. At this moment, Ron used the weak light from the Philosopher's Stone to carve a name on the book. Tristalum Khan. That's right, the progenitor of necromancy, Khan, had been here before. Perhaps he had learned necromancy here. If I'm not wrong, This is the combat section of the second volume. As for the first volume, it must be about cultivating the power of the soul. Ron muttered to himself as he put down the book in his hand. He looked around, but couldn't find the first volume. This meant that the necromancy magic that Khan had learned was missing the most important part of cultivating the power of the soul. That was why the necromancy magic on the continent of Noah was so weak. Ron flipped through the book in his hand. He understood most of the content inside. It was a very basic knowledge in necromancy magic. Ron looked around the cave, but found that there was nothing else apart from the book and the illustration on the wall. This is a wasted trip. Forget it, I'll leave. Ron couldn't help but feel disappointed that he had only found these things after spending so much effort to find the floating island. After meeting Lord Noah, he knew everything he needed to know. These illustrations were meaningless to him. He only knew where the useless necromancy magic on the continent of Noah came from. Ron casually tossed the book aside. After thinking for a bit, he put it back. At this moment, his hand seemed to have touched something. A black death aura instantly filled the air. This is... Ron's expression changed. The drifting black fog suddenly condensed and quickly wrapped around Ron. The death aura that looked like a black fog suddenly started to invade Ron's soul. Soul attack. Ron's heart shook. It was too late for him to react. He could only see the death aura spreading like a virus and invading his sea of consciousness. Very quickly, Ron's soul's line of defense fell. No. Not good. Ron turned pale with fright. He immediately calmed his mind and sat down. He entered a state of cultivation and focused on dealing with the invading death aura. The death aura was very powerful. It was like a spirit snake that kept twisting and twisting, starting to corrode Ron's soul. Under Ron's firm willpower, his soul started to counterattack, repelling the strange death aura's attacks again and again. At this moment, Ron's soul was no longer in a state where it could be trampled upon. The soul of a powerhouse of the sacred domain was extremely powerful, especially for someone like Ron who cultivated soul force. Ordinary soul attacks had no effect on him. Ron carefully guided his soul force to wrap around the invading death aura. Not long after, the invading death aura gathered and formed a small black fog. It was compressed into a small space. Fortunately, Ron's soul force had already reached the sacred domain. Otherwise, he might have been controlled by this strange power and become its puppet. Only now did Ron dare to breathe a sigh of relief. However, he was very curious. Where did this strange power come from? How could this small floating island have such a strange power? Just as Ron was puzzled, the black ball of air that had been condensed suddenly changed. It turned into a book with a thick black cover. Its body was covered in mysterious patterns. A heavy power seeped out and filled the entire space. On the black cover, there were a few words written in large letters. Book of Death, Book of Death. Ron's heart trembled. That Book of Death appeared in Ron's mind. It was wrapped in a thick cover and its contents couldn't be seen. As if it had some kind of attraction, Ron suddenly impatiently wanted to open the book. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't open the Book of Death. At this time, Ron's mind was moved. He tried to use his soul to touch the book, but unexpectedly, he succeeded. The floating Book of Death slowly flipped to the first page. Death Coil. Ron's heart shook. What entered his eyes was a familiar necromancy spell, Death Coil. This necromancy spell that could heal undead and attack the enemy's soul was recorded in this Book of Death. Could it be that this was a cultivation magic book? Ron resisted the excitement in his heart and used his soul force to probe, turning to another page. Death Withering. Ron wasn't unfamiliar with this spell. Homeland's grandfather had used this spell against Ranarier. It was this spell that had defeated Ranarier and forced him to flee. Legend had it that the Book of Death was written by a god that cultivated the power of death. It recorded powerful spells that defied the heavens. These spells were much more powerful than necromancy magic. Its research on the soul was even more in-depth. Ron looked at the Book of Death and quietly entered a state of cultivation. He eagerly studied the knowledge recorded in the Book of Death. The world outside the floating island had unknowingly calmed down. It was a sunny day like usual. The sparkling waves of the sea slowly flowed. The violent scene from before was like an illusion. Pornographic novels. After 10 days, Ron finally opened his eyes. During these days, he had only studied the second page of the Book of Death, which was the spell Death Withering. As for the third page of the Book of Death, he couldn't flip it no matter what. This book is good stuff. Ron sighed. What he didn't know was that this Book of Death wasn't a book, but a strand of thought. Just like when Homelin taught him necromancy magic, apart from explanations, it was more of a direct infusion of thoughts. Of course, this strand of thought came from. Ron stood up, patted the dust off his body, and slowly walked out of the cave. At this time, he was stunned to discover that the black fog surrounding the floating island had disappeared at some point. Sunlight shone on his body, warming him up. The surroundings were sunny and sunny. How strange, could it be that all of this was caused by the Book of Death? Ron muttered to himself. However, Ron didn't think too much about it. He wanted to return to the Moran Kingdom and tell his father everything so that he wouldn't worry. Ron's body slowly rose. He fiercely turned his head, and his body turned into a cloud of smoke as he quickly flew towards the west. The floating island was calmly floating above the sea. At this moment, the floating island finally revealed its full appearance. Rather than calling it an island, it would be better to call it a huge rock. Apart from a small cave, there was nothing else. Warm sunlight quietly shone on this island, and below it was the slowly flowing sea. Suddenly, a tremor came from the floating island. The tremor grew stronger and stronger, and countless huge rocks started to fall one by one. They fell to the surface of the sea and splashed up waves. After losing the power of the Book of Death, the floating island started to disintegrate. At the same time, the huge floating island slowly sank. The huge floating island fell to the surface of the sea, setting off waves more than 10 feet high. In the end, the floating island completely sank until it disappeared from the surface of the sea. Along with the secrets it recorded, it disappeared in the long river of history. From this day onwards, the taboo sea became a legend. Many years later, after a fisherman accidentally broke in, this region of the sea became no longer dangerous and mysterious, and fishermen started to fish here. Of course, this was a story for later. Chapter 533. In a magnificent room there was a faint fragrance. It wasn't the smell of burning incense wood, but the natural body fragrance of a woman. In front of a large dressing mirror, an extremely beautiful woman was sitting upright, her beautiful face reflected in the mirror. Behind her, a beautiful woman dressed in palace attire was carefully combing the woman's long blue hair. Her long hair was like a waterfall, full of luster. The woman in front of the mirror sat quietly in front of the mirror, like a puppet that the beautiful woman was fiddling with. That beautiful woman was Kadena. At this moment, she was wearing a luxurious white wedding dress, which set off her beautiful white jade-like figure. The upper half of the wedding dress didn't have any traces of cloth, but if one looked carefully, they would see that it was made of extremely small pearls. The lower half of the dress was made of the highest quality silk, and the snow-white crystal shoes were inlaid with a pigeon egg-sized ruby. This wedding dress was not cheap. In fact, it far exceeded the value of a high-grade dark gold-grade weapon. However, Katina did not look happy in the slightest when she wore such a high-grade wedding dress. That was because she was marrying someone she did not love. Looking at her appearance, the beautiful woman sighed softly and said, "Miss Kadena, things have already come to this point. Why do you still have to be like this?" Katina didn't move. She continued to sit there quietly, as if she couldn't hear anything. She was stupefied. The beautiful woman continued to persuade. His Highness Reynolds is an extremely outstanding man, a genius of the Noah continent. He has already broken through the peak of the master rank and is preparing to step into the sacred domain. You and him are a match made in heaven. Kadena, what are you still dissatisfied with? The beautiful woman took a step forward and gently placed her hand on Kadena's shoulder. She said word by word, "Forget about that guy called Ron. He's not suitable for you." Kadena slowly raised her head. When she heard the two words, Ron, her bright eyes glowed with a glimmer of light before dimming again. She said in a clear voice, "Go out, I want to be alone for a while. Miss Kadena, you must think carefully. Don't do anything stupid." The beautiful woman wanted to continue persuading, but she was interrupted by Kadena. She stood up with a swoosh and raised her voice. "I told you to get out. Didn't you hear?" "Yes. Yes, Your Highness, this servant will take her leave." Seeing that Kadena was angry, the beautiful woman could only give a cursory bow. She didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly walked out. The room became quiet again. Kadena faintly sighed. She was originally very beautiful, but now that she was wearing a wedding dress, she was like a beautiful goddess. No, even the most beautiful goddess could not compare to her. Unfortunately, at this moment, the goddess's face was filled with worry. No matter how beautiful the wedding dress was, if it wasn't for the person she loved the most, then what was the point? In 3 days, she would marry someone she didn't love. That person was Reynolds. Ever since she returned to Doro Kingdom, Reynolds used her father, the Doro King, to force her to marry him. But Kadena kept on refusing, even threatening to go on a hunger strike. Looking at his daughter who was getting thinner day by day, her father, the Doro King, felt incomparable heartache. In the end, her father compromised. He tried to negotiate with the kingdom's guardian, the venomous scorpion lion Knight Ram, hoping to use other conditions to cancel Kadena's engagement. But when Ram heard this, he flew into a rage. He ordered his left and right to arrest the Doro King and put him in prison. At the same time, he launched a coup d'état, using thunderous means to control all the Doro Kingdom's army and force the Doro King to abdicate. In just a few days, Ram changed from the Doro Kingdom's guardian to the new Doro King. With absolute strength, he swept away all the opposing forces. Some of the Doro Kingdom's army and forces loyal to the Doro King were quickly suppressed, and Ram became the Doro Kingdom's ruler. Reynolds also became the prince, the only successor of the Doro Kingdom, and Princess Kadena became an ordinary family's young lady. The original members of the Doro royal family were imprisoned one after another. Those who weren't imprisoned also became Reynolds' lackeys. For example, that beautiful woman from before was a member of the Doro royal family. According to seniority, Kadena should call her aunt, and Reynolds took the opportunity to force the marriage. Under the double pressure of her family's life and her own happiness, Kadena could only compromise. That's why the opening scene happened. Calmly looking at her beautiful face in the mirror, Kadena's mood inexplicably became irritable. This peerlessly beautiful face was the basis of her pride, but at this moment, she wanted nothing more than to destroy it with her own hands. Knock, knock, knock. A knocking sound came from the door, but Kadena ignored it. Knock, knock, knock. That knocking sound didn't seem to give up as it came again. This time, the sound was a bit louder. Kadena suddenly stood up, her face full of anger, and coldly reprimanded, "Didn't I say that no one can disturb me? Didn't you hear me?" Just as her voice fell, with a creak, the door opened. Outside the door was a smiling face. Kadena opened her eyes wide. "Sister Shea, how come it's you?" Shea walked in with a smile and carefully closed the door. She glanced at Kadena and said, "Little girl, you're getting more and more beautiful. Sister Shea is jealous to death." Kadena blushed and lowered her head. "Sister Shea is making fun of me again." Shea smiled and pulled Kadena to give her a spin. "My little princess is getting more and more beautiful. If Ron were to see you like this, he would." Kadina's face darkened. I'm no longer a princess. What's going on? Shea was obviously shocked. That's right, when I came back just now, I wanted to directly come in to look for you, but I was stopped by your royal guards and almost got into a fight. In the past, I casually came in because I didn't want things to get out of hand, so I secretly came in. What's going on here? Kadina sighed and told her about the disturbance in the Doro kingdom. What? There's actually such a thing? Shea's eyes widened. Ram actually became the king of the Doro kingdom, and his son Renaud actually came to marry you as the prince of the Doro kingdom? Shea didn't expect that so many things would happen while she was away. Kadina sighed and looked at Shea. She bit her lip and asked, Sister Shea, what did Ron say about your trip to the Molan kingdom? Shea shook her head. I did go to the Molan kingdom, but I didn't see Ron. I only saw Hera. She told me that Ron went to participate in the Foreign Dragons assessment and hasn't returned yet. Is that so? Kadina's face darkened and she smiled bitterly. Her beauty was heartbreaking. She faintly said, This is my fate, my life is so bitter. Tears fell from her eyes as she spoke. Shea's expression was uncertain. Finally, she clenched her teeth. Kadina, come with me. Even if we can't find Ron, let's go out and hide for a while. Everything will proceed according to the original plan. I came back this time to take you away. With that, Shea grabbed Kadina's hand and was about to take her out. No. Sister Shea. Kadina screamed and pulled her hand back as if she had seen a ghost. Shea looked at her in astonishment. Sister Shea, I can't go with you. Kadina covered her face and cried bitterly. My father, my brother, they're all in Reynolds's hands. How can I just leave? Shea fell silent. Looking at the weeping Kadina, her eyes flashed with killing intent. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to rush out and kill Reynolds. However, Reynolds had the sacred domain expert Ram behind him. Even if Reynolds himself wasn't weak, Shea wasn't confident that she could kill him. At this moment, Shea thought of her grandfather, Blue Sword Saint Corbett. However, Corbett was currently far away in the fairy forest. Even if she rushed back, she wouldn't make it in time. Kadina, don't tell me you really want to marry that guy? Shea bit her lip and asked. At this moment, she had no other choice. Kadina wiped the tears from her cheeks and smiled bitterly. What else can I do? I can't use the blood of my family to exchange for a lifetime of happiness. If I do that, I won't be able to rest in peace for the rest of my life. Shea looked at Kadina with a complicated expression. She sighed and nodded as if she could only accept this reality. She hesitated and asked, then Ron? Kadina's heart ached slightly. This name brought back many sweet memories. Her long eyelashes drooped and her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. I can't be his wife in this life. Perhaps in the next life. Kadina bit her lip. Her face was filled with despair. She seemed to have accepted her fate. I've already written a letter to him. Counting the days, it should be about time. At this moment, Kadina grabbed Shea's arm. Sister Shea, I'll leave Ron to you. You have to take good care of him for me. A few days later, Ron returned to the Amolan kingdom. What welcomed him were smiling faces. Basara, Rainey, Hera, and the rest. Ron even saw his aunt, Queen Latte. When they saw that Ron had advanced to the sacred domain, they were very surprised. Ron went to see his father, Pluto, and told him everything that happened during this period of time. However, he left out the part about Noah and passed his mother's keepsake, which was the necklace, to him. Pluto held the necklace and didn't say a word for a long time. You mean, someone was looking for me these few days? And for my letter? In the back garden of the Amolan palace, Ron looked at Hera and asked in surprise. Beside him stood Basara and Rainey. Yes, Sister Shea came to look for you. However, when she saw that you weren't around, she left. Rainey rushed to say. Did she say anything? Ron thought for a while and asked. She didn't say anything. However, When she saw that you weren't around, she seemed very disappointed. Basara said as she recalled. Let's read the letter first. Hera passed a letter to Ron. There was no cover or signature on the letter, so he couldn't tell who wrote it. Ron opened the letter and realized that it was a pornographic novel. It was written by Kadena, but the contents of the letter made his face change drastically. It was a letter to break off all relations. In the letter, she said that she was going to marry Reynolds soon and asked him to forget about her and stop looking for her. Brother Ron, what's wrong with you? Looking at Ron's angry face, Rainey asked in shock. What did the letter say? Why? Ron suddenly roared. It was as if there was a ball of fire in his heart that was going to explode at any time. At that moment, he was like an injured wild beast. At that moment, his ability had already reached the sacred domain. A powerful aura was released uncontrollably from his body. Even Hera, who was standing beside him, could feel her body trembling. The three girls read the letter one by one and looked at each other. They were all shocked by the contents of the letter. What exactly is going on? Kadena didn't explain the reason in the letter, and this made Ron even more furious. Kadena didn't write the reason in the letter because she didn't want Ron to worry. It must be Reynolds. Reynolds forced her. It must be. Chapter 534. Princess Hera, there's another urgent letter. Just as Ron was about to go crazy, a palace guard hurriedly ran over with a letter in his hand. Hera frowned and took the letter. Another letter? Who is it for? The palace guard said. It was sent by that woman called Shea. It's a pornographic novel. The person said that they hope you can pass this letter to Prince Ron as soon as possible. A letter from Shea to Ron? The three girls were shocked. Give it to me, Ron roared. As he had cultivated the Book of Death, the death energy in his body made people tremble. The palace guard trembled and passed the letter to Ron. Ron couldn't wait to tear open the letter. Once he opened it, Shea's familiar handwriting entered his eyes. The handwriting was messy, and it looked like it was written in a hurry. The contents of the letter roughly explained why Kadena married Reynolds. She was forced by Reynolds and had no choice. She asked Ron to forgive her and so on. After Ron finished reading the letter, his hands couldn't help but tremble. He clenched his fists tightly, and the letter in his hands turned into dust. Reynolds, you actually forced her. I want you to die a horrible death. Ron gritted his teeth. His eyes were bloodshot, and wisps of black fog seeped through his clothes. He was really angry. Basara saw Ron's expression and hurriedly said, Ron, calm down. Don't be rash. That's right, Ron. That venomous manticore knight, Ram, has been in the sacred domain for many years. You just entered the sacred domain. You have to be careful. Let's plan this carefully. Hera seemed to know what Ron wanted to do and advised him. Ron took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. What's the date today? The three girls had yet to react. Only Rainey answered in a daze. Number 3. It's today. Ron muttered to himself. His eyes looked towards the horizon, and his eyes turned into a wretched green color. The black fog around his body suddenly became thicker. Ron began chanting in a low voice. Undead from the depths of hell. In the name of Ron, I summon you. Become my strength and crush all the enemies that stand in my way. Come out, abyssal skeletal dragon. After Ron finished chanting the incantation, he let out a loud shout. With a boom, the sky suddenly darkened, and a boundless undead aura shrouded the earth like smoke, filling the entire palace. A huge spatial vortex suddenly opened, and from the space inside, an extremely huge and terrifying creature slowly emerged. That huge undead creature was more than 40 meters long and looked like a dragon. However, it had no flesh on its body and looked like a skeleton. Its body was surrounded by black flames, and its eyes were as red as evil. The bone dragon landed on the huge, round roof of the Moran royal palace. It spread its bony wings, which didn't have a trace of flesh and blood, and raised its head high, letting out a world-shaking roar. Roar! The black flames on the skeletal dragon's body flared up, and the aura of death completely spread. It was like a devil that had returned from the depths of hell, powerful, cold, cruel, and ruthless. Hera, Basara, and Rainey were stunned. They didn't know that Ron could summon such a terrifying undead creature. What happened? Why did the sky turn dark? It's a strong martial artist from the sacred domain. Enemy attack, enemy attack. Darkness engulfed Emolan Palace, and the aura of death filled the entire place. The people in the palace were in a mess. Queen Latte was discussing something with her husband, Prince Omuni. Suddenly, Omuni's expression changed. "My dear, what's going on?" Queen Latte also felt the terrifying and powerful energy, and asked in shock. What a powerful energy, what a powerful aura of death. The magical beast from the sacred domain, Snow Tiger Omuni, had a serious look in his eyes. Just based on this energy, I'm afraid even I am no match for it. A strong martial artist from the sacred domain. Latte was shocked. Could it be a strong martial artist from the sacred domain that came to attack us? No. Omuni shook his head. If I'm not wrong, this energy comes from your nephew who cultivates undead magic. Ron. What? Queen Latte couldn't contain her shock. Didn't he just advance to the sacred domain? How can he have such a powerful energy? Ron, what do you plan to do? Hera was frightened by the sudden appearance of this terrifying undead creature and asked stutteringly. I'm going to bring her back, Ron answered slowly. He slowly stepped onto the gigantic abyss skeletal dragon's back. The abyss skeletal dragon lowered its head, as if it was welcoming its master, extremely obedient. At that moment, Ron's face revealed a hint of savagery. Ram Reynolds, I'm going to show you the true terror of undead magic. Ron let out a long howl, matching the roar of the abyss skeletal dragon. With a kick of its legs and a sweep of its long tail, it carried Ron and rose into the sky like a sharp sword. The powerful aura of death suddenly disappeared, and everyone felt the pressure in their hearts lighten. Hera slightly heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she frowned again. Rainey nestled in Basara's arms, a trace of fear on her small face. Sister Basara, did you notice that Big Brother Ron has changed? Yes, he has changed. He has become stronger and more confident. Basara's eyes shone brightly. Don't forget, he has a heavy mission on his shoulders. In the spacious plaza, a grand wedding was being held. Both sides of the plaza were filled with people who wanted to watch the show. On both sides of the plaza, there were soldiers who were like wooden statues, coldly guarding, not allowing anyone to come close. The viewing platform in the middle was filled with distinguished guests. They were all people of high status, and there were even strong people from the sacred domain. On one side of the high seat, the principal of the Balarax Academy, Prats, was sitting upright. Beside him stood his assistant, Dabu. Below him sat two people. One was the principal of the Soaring Dragon Academy, the Golden Flying Dragon Knight, Montigot. The other was the King of Assassins, Hill, who was also the principal of the Hanses Academy. Hee, old ghost, congratulations for nurturing such an outstanding student like Kadena. Nowadays, such a genius student is rare. Montigot said with a sigh. Prats laughed and said, It can't be compared to your Soaring Dragon Academy. I heard that this year, you received the support of Dragon Island. It's just mutual benefit. Montigot said, Many of our students are also working for Dragon Island. Dragon Island was the #1 power in the Noah continent. Montigot felt proud to work for Dragon Island. The King of Assassins, Hill, sat at the side motionlessly and didn't join in the conversation. Montigot said, Looks like Ram is really generous this time. Not only did he invite the strong people from the sacred domain from the 3 great academies of the Roland Empire, He even invited the principals of the Thunder Academy and Aeolus Academy. They are all good friends of Ram. Gue said that Renaud is also the direct disciple of the Thunder Academy's principal, Lettrel. Prats looked at a fat old man and a skinny middle-aged man sitting on the other side and lightly nodded. As if they felt the gaze of Prats and the others, Thunder Academy's principal, Lettrel, and Aeolus Academy's principal, Storm, also looked over and nodded at them with a friendly smile. Prats and Montigot also nodded at them as a form of greeting. There was another person sitting at the head. This person's strength had already reached the sacred domain. However, this wasn't important. What was important was that her identity and the power behind her wasn't simple. She was a saint wizard from the Orc Empire, Miss Morin. At this moment, she had already been promoted from a great wizard to a saint wizard. As the representative of the Orc Empire, she came to attend the ceremony. Morin sat there and didn't talk to anyone. She even ignored some of the strong people from the sacred domain. She was like a quiet orchid in an empty valley. His Majesty King Doro has arrived. Following the Imperial Guard's command, the entire audience quieted down, and the soldiers half knelt down with a schwa sound. Welcome His Majesty Doro. As the Doro soldiers shouted in unison, a figure suddenly appeared on the long red carpet. It was Ram. Lam was wearing the king's robe that symbolized the Doro kingdom. He had a smile on his face as he slowly walked forward. Every step he took was very firm, showing that he had a very high level of cultivation. He looked like an unsheathed sword. Prats frowned. What? King Doro? When did Ram become the king of Doro? This was the first time Montigot heard this news. He was also stunned. No way, Ram is the king of Doro? According to my information, that guy became the king of Doro a few days ago. At this time, the Silent Hill laughed. Just a few days ago, he launched a coup and overthrew the Doro royal family and became the king. Yes, that's it. Montigot softly said, Oh. For experts of the sacred domain like them, this wasn't a big deal. With strength, they could naturally change all the rules as long as they wanted to. Montigot faintly smiled. Ram becoming the king of Doro isn't necessarily a good thing. They were busy with government affairs and naturally neglected their cultivation. For experts of the sacred domain, possessing strength was the most important thing. Those worldly power, money, and beauties were like floating clouds to them. Then what about the original king of Doro? Where did he go? Pratt stared blankly as he thought of a crucial question. Where did he go? Naturally, he was sent to prison. Hill helplessly shrugged. His organization was very strict, so naturally he was very well informed. He glanced at Prats and said, Otherwise, do you think your student who is the princess of a kingdom would be willing to marry Reynolds? What's going on here? Montigot asked. What I know is that Princess Cadena has fallen in love with another person. But as for who that person is, I haven't investigated it yet. Hill shook his head. Montigot, you know that I don't like to inquire about meaningless gossip. Oh! Montigot nodded in realization. He thoughtfully stared at Ram. I didn't expect this kid to have such a deep desire for power. Despicable and shameless person. Prats coldly snorted, a trace of anger flashing in his eyes. He hated people who used the lives of their loved ones to threaten others. Montigot faintly smiled. Hey, old ghost, there's no need to be so angry. We're only here to observe the ceremony. There's no need to fight with Ram over such a small matter. Prats actually knew that he couldn't meddle in other people's affairs. Besides, there were people from the Beastman Empire watching. No matter how long his hands were, they couldn't reach into the Beastman Empire's sphere of influence. He was simply angry. Hill faintly smiled and glanced at Pratt. Old Ghost Prats, even if you want to fight with him, you won't be able to gain any advantage. According to reliable sources, Ram had some sort of fortuitous encounter. Not only did his strength increase greatly, he even obtained a legendary sacred artifact. What? Sacred artifact? Pratt's and Montegot's eyes lit up when they heard this. At this time, the king of Doro, Ram, had already walked up the stone steps to the high viewing platform. He looked around and greeted familiar people. At this time, he waved at the guard beside him. Chapter 535. At this moment, the Doro Kingdom's ceremonial group starts to play. They are wearing red robes and tall hats on their head. Huge musical instruments hang down to the ground as melodious music starts to play, welcoming the newlyweds into the venue. Under the lead of a beautiful woman, Kadena slowly walks into the venue. She is wearing a pure white wedding dress and is holding beautiful flowers in her hands. Her face is wearing light makeup and her beautiful long hair is tied up high. She looks indescribably luxurious and dazzling. The moment Kadena appears, everyone is stunned. Not only the men, even the women are exclaiming in admiration at her beauty. Look, the bride is coming out. The bride is so beautiful. She is Her Highness Princess Kadena. But it is a pity that she is no longer Her Highness Princess. Damn it, this kind of beauty should be mine. Everyone is discussing and exclaiming in admiration from time to time. Many men shoot jealous glances at Reynolds. In fact, after marrying the beautiful as an angel Kadena, Reynolds has already become the public enemy of all the men in Doro Kingdom. But he has an arrogant and overbearing guardian father. At least within the borders of Doro Kingdom, no one dares to touch him. That moment of breathtaking also intimidates all the guests on the viewing platform. Hee, Platt's old geezer, your academy's female students are all not bad. King of Assassins Hill smiles. Looks like this Reynolds's luck with women is not bad. Montegot is also shocked by Kadena's beauty, and only regains his senses after a long time. Kadena is being pulled by the middle-aged woman like a clay puppet. Her face does not have any trace of expression. Her good sister, Shea, is currently standing in the crowd with an anxious expression. Beside her is Shea, who seems to be waiting for something. The more she waits, the more disappointed her face becomes. Looks like Ron is not coming. I wrote the letter last night and sent it overnight. I am afraid that he did not receive it. Shea sighs as she quietly looks at Kadena's back. Ron, I have already done my best. Why are you going to Dragon Island? If he doesn't come back, Kadena will really marry Reynolds. At this moment, Reynolds slowly walked up with the crowd surrounding him. He was wearing a well-ironed ceremonial robe. His sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes made him look quite valiant. As one of the young talents of the Doro Kingdom, his strength had also reached the peak of the master rank. It's His Highness Prince Renaud. His Highness Prince Renaud is here. Long live Prince Reynolds. At this time, cheers came from below the grandstand. A group of people kept clapping their hands and shouting slogans. These people were all hired by Reynolds to cheer him on. With a smile on his face, Reynolds kept waving to the crowd, trying his best to create a friendly image. Unfortunately, the onlookers didn't buy it. Other than those people, no one on the huge viewing platform responded. Ram had only been in power for a few days, and he had even used bloody methods of suppression. The majority of the citizens of the Doro Kingdom were still on the side of the Doro royal family. Reynolds's complexion immediately became stiff. His expression was incomparably awkward. He slowly lowered his hand and coldly snorted. With a gloomy face, he walked forward without saying a word. Ram's complexion was also unsightly. His eyes flickered with ominous glint. Damn it, these lowly commoners really don't know how to appreciate favors. Let's invite the bride and groom to the stage. Along with the ceremonial official's loud voice, the pair of newlyweds finally walked together. Reynolds and Kadena looked at each other. He gently cupped Kadena's face. Looking at her dainty and peerless face, Reynolds was so excited that his body was somewhat trembling. Even in his dreams, he had been expecting this day to come. That's great, Kadena. From today onwards, you are my wife. Kadena slowly raised her head. There was no trace of fluctuation in her eyes. She faintly said, Reynolds, you know, the one I love is not you. Perhaps you can get my body, but you will never get my heart. Reynolds, I hope you can think it over clearly. If you truly love me, then don't force me. When Reynolds heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. However, when he thought of the current situation, he still suppressed the anger in his heart. Good, very good. Kadena, even now, you are still thinking about that brat. Very good. Reynolds nodded. He was so angry that he laughed instead. His face became sinister as he fiercely said, Let me tell you, Kadena, whether it is your body or your heart, I will definitely get you today. Also, Kadena, don't forget, the lives of your father and everyone in your family are in my hands. If there is any mishap in today's wedding, you can just wait to collect their corpses. When Kadena heard this, her entire body trembled. Then, she fell silent. The two's conversation was very quiet. Even the people closest to them might not necessarily hear it. From afar, it was just like a pair of lovers whispering to each other. Hee hee, Your Excellency Ram, look at the two of them. What a match made in heaven. At this time, Thunder Academy's headmaster, Headmaster Lettrel, who was sitting on the viewing platform, said to Ram. Ram said with a smile, Then I have to thank Headmaster Lettrel for his nurturing. This brat has always made me worry since he was young. The two of them laughed. At this time, Reynolds smiled. He gently pinched one of Kadena's lily-white hands and said with a smile, Dear, let's go up. Kadena didn't struggle. She could only let him pull her. As if she was already obedient, she walked up the viewing platform step by step. On the viewing platform, the wedding officiator was already standing there. He was a benevolent old man. He was dressed in a pure white priest's robe. He wore a cross on his chest and held a scripture in his hand. He was Archbishop Bostine. He was invited by Ram to officiate the wedding of Reynolds and Kadena. At this time, Reynolds pulled Kadena to stand in front of Archbishop Bostine. Reynolds said with a smile, Hello, Your Excellency. We can begin. May God's glory always shine upon you. Archbishop Bostine, who came from the Holy See, crossed himself. Archbishop Bostine looked at the pair of newlyweds and nodded with satisfaction. Your Highness Prince Reynolds, Miss Kadena, I want to ask the two of you the same question. This is a very long question. Please listen patiently before answering. Archbishop Bostine looked at Reynolds and said with a smile, Your Highness Prince Reynolds, are you willing to take Miss Kadena as your wife? Live with her according to God's will? Become one with her before God? Love her, comfort her, respect her, and protect her as you love yourself. Regardless of whether she is sick or healthy, rich or poor, you will always be faithful to her until she leaves this world? I am willing, Reynolds replied loudly. He straightened his chest and his voice was exceptionally loud. Archbishop Bostine nodded with satisfaction. He looked at Kadena and said, Beautiful Kadena, are you willing to take His Highness Prince Reynolds as your wife? Live with him according to God's will? Become one with him before God? Love him, comfort him, respect him, and protect him as you love yourself. Regardless of whether he is sick or healthy, rich or poor, you will always be faithful to him until he leaves this world? Bostine said benevolently. As he spoke, he unknowingly emitted a holy light. For a moment, all eyes were gathered on Kadena. As long as Kadena said the words, I am willing, the wedding would be complete. Kadena's lips trembled and her body involuntarily trembled. At this moment, Ron's face appeared in her mind. She closed her eyes and 2 lines of clear tears slid down her cheeks. The 3 words, I do, weighed as much as Qianjun to her, and she couldn't say it at all. Bostine knitted his brows and exchanged glances with Reynolds. He finally reacted quickly and repeated what he said just now, giving Kadena plenty of time to think. But Kadena bit her lips and couldn't say those words for a long time. At this moment, the onlookers could also see that the beautiful Princess Kadena didn't want to marry him at all. A toad lusting after a swan's flesh. Reynolds, you should give up on this idea as soon as possible. You don't deserve Princess Kadena at all. The surrounding onlookers booed. Even though Ram had already become the king of the Kingdom of Doro in name, many people still missed the previous dynasty. For a moment, all kinds of strange discussions rang out and entered everyone's ears. Reynolds's expression was very unsightly, but he still waited patiently. However, his eyes were full of urging. Headmaster Lettrel of the Thunder Academy and Storm of the Wind God Academy looked at each other with confusion in their eyes. Ram's face suddenly became gloomy. As a noble of the sacred domain, he couldn't back down in front of everyone if Kadena rejected him in public. At this moment, a trace of killing intent flashed in his deep eye sockets for the first time towards Kadena. At this moment, Holy Wizard Morin remembered the first time the girl and Ron met. Her heart skipped a beat as if she understood something. She smiled and pretended to be casual. Sir Ram, it seems like the bride isn't too willing. How about we postpone the wedding and let her go back and think about it? Lam finally couldn't hold it in any longer. He stood up, smiled stiffly, and said, Katina, you and Reynolds have been childhood sweethearts since you were young. You grew up together, so your relationship is naturally very good. I understand your nervousness, but I advise you to think about it carefully. Don't make a mistake. After saying some threatening words, Ram sat down. However, his energy was still firmly locked onto Kadena, giving her constant pressure. Shaya's hand was already tightly pressed on the portal bag on her waist. Her body couldn't stop trembling. She wanted to rush up and take Kadena away, but she knew her limits. She didn't have the confidence to take Kadena away from this place in front of Ram. Ah! Everyone held their breaths as they waited for Kadena's reply. At this moment, the King of Assassins, Hill, suddenly slapped his thigh, giving Platts and Montygot a fright. What's wrong? You're always so jumpy. Montygot complained. I remember now. Who is the person that Katina fell in love with? Hill seemed to have realized something. You two know this person too. Who is it? Platts and Montygot asked in unison. At this moment Kadena's tears kept pouring out. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes in resignation. She was about to blurt out a sentence. I'm willing. I don't agree. At this moment, a thunderous voice sounded, causing everyone's heart to tremble. It was too late to say it, but in the blink of an eye, a black light flashed and whistled. Reynolds's expression changed. Be careful! Bang! A white bone spear pierced deeply into his flesh. Archbishop Bostine looked at the bone spear in front of his chest in disbelief. He didn't even see how the other party attacked before he met with the misfortune of death. How did this happen? Archbishop Bostine said unwillingly, the most pornographic novel. In the end, his body fell down with a bang, becoming the first person to be sacrificed. An honorable Archbishop Guangming priest, a master powerhouse, was killed in an instant. Murder! A scream sounded. For a moment, the entire viewing platform was in chaos. The residents below were in chaos. Everyone screamed and ran away. The scene was chaotic. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Quick, protect His Highness Reynolds! Some soldiers loyal to Ram and his son rushed to the viewing platform as if to protect them. Even the powerhouses of the sacred domain on the viewing platform stood up and looked at the sky in the distance. At this moment, a black cloud-like behemoth appeared in the sky, bringing with it endless death and slaughter. It was an extremely huge beast. It had a pair of huge wings and was surrounded by black flames. The terrifying aura that enveloped the entire city was filled with violence, madness, and a trace of strangeness. The people on the ground widened their eyes in horror as they looked at the terrifying creature in the sky. Dragon! That's a dragon! A soldier said with his eyes wide open in horror. Oh my God, how could it be a dragon? That's not a dragon, but it looks like a dragon skeleton. Another soldier said. Look, there's a person standing on the dragon's back. Is it a dragon knight? At this moment, everyone's eyes swept towards the young man standing on the dragon's back. Ron! When they saw the young man on the dragon's back, Ram, Prats, Montegot, Hill, and Morin were shocked. Who else could it be but Ron? Ron! It's actually you? You're ruining my wedding again. Reynolds's eyes were about to spit fire. It was this Ron again. He actually messed up the wedding venue. Reynolds, you want to marry Kadena. Did you ask me? Ron laughed and waved his hand. To tell you the truth, Kadena is my woman. No one can take her away from me. Ron, you're finally here. Shea's eyes were filled with tears. Ron had finally arrived at the wedding venue at the last moment. He did it. He finally did it. Kadena's face was filled with surprise. Tears flowed down her cheeks. This time, they were tears of joy. My husband is a noble dragon knight. He was a man of indomitable spirit. He had a head of beautiful golden hair, wore noble armor, and held a long dragon spear in his hand. At my wedding, he rode a huge fire-breathing flying dragon, stepping on a multicolored light as he appeared from the horizon to marry me. Ron silently repeated the words that Kadena had said to him. She had only said these words to him once, but they were deeply imprinted in his mind. Kadena, I've finally fulfilled my promise to you. Today I, Ron, Grand Magus Necromancer, rode an abyssal bone dragon to marry my bride. Kadena, you belong to me. From now on, there's no power that can separate us. Chapter 536. The abyssal skeletal dragon flapped its huge wings and slowly approached. A terrifying aura of death enveloped the entire area. In an instant, the sky darkened. At this time, everyone finally saw the appearance of that huge life form and became panic-stricken. Heavens! Such a terrifying power, just what is it? Why do I feel a sense of death in my heart? Is it my misconception? Not good, it's a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Run! This was the first time an abyssal skeletal dragon had appeared on the Noah continent. Its appearance caused great panic among the people. The weak couldn't bear the pressure that enveloped their hearts and retreated one after another. Morin opened her eyes wide in astonishment. Is this really Ron? His strength has actually reached the sacred domain? No, he's not a dragon knight. A soldier of the Doro kingdom suddenly shouted. I remember now, he's a necromancer, one of those necromancers that summon skeletons to fight. No way? Necromancer? Something that only looks impressive. Another soldier said. That's right, necromancers don't have any power, the skeletons they summon are just for show. A soldier at the side said. Seeing the skeletal dragon flying in the sky, some people sighed in relief. Since it was a necromancer, then it would be easy to deal with. Necromancers were the most trashy profession on the Noah continent, there was nothing to be afraid of. But what's with that powerful aura? At this time, a soldier thought for a bit and asked. It's most likely a bluff. Another soldier said, half believing and half doubting. That skeletal dragon is definitely not for show. On the viewing platform, the Soaring Dragon Academy's dean, the golden flying dragon knight Montego, stood up and stared at Ron. The thick beard on his chin trembled as he revealed a dignified expression. It carries a powerful aura of death and has the strength of the sacred domain. It's even not below my golden flying dragon. Ron is a necromancer. The dean of the Hans Academy, the king of assassins, smiled. Of course, he's not a necromancer in the common sense, but a true necromancer. I didn't expect his strength to finally reach the sacred domain. This bone dragon is proof of that. As he spoke, he glanced at Platz, the headmaster of Ballarak's academy. If I remember correctly, He should be only 20 years old, right? Not bad. Platz gently stroked his sparse white beard and looked at Ron as if he was looking at a proud work of art. So this is a necromancer from the sacred domain? Being able to summon such a bone dragon is indeed very interesting. Old man, Ron and Kadena are both students of your Ballarak's academy. What should we do now? It was clear that Ram had forced Kadena to marry his son. Now that Ron had returned with the strength of the sacred domain, Platz could not stay out of this. This meant that the two of them would not be spared. Platz smiled. Let's wait and see. Who is this person? The power he uses is very strange. I've never seen it before. Lettrel, the headmaster of Thunder Academy, frowned and glanced at Ram. Ram coldly snorted. He's just a little bastard who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He's a necromancer who just advanced to the sacred domain, and he's already showing off. What? Necromancer? Storm, the headmaster of Wind God Academy, was shocked. He's the trashiest profession in history, a necromancer who can summon skeletons to do battle? The undead he summons is actually so powerful? I don't believe it. He's an ancient necromancer. He cultivates the legendary necromancy magic. Ram's lips curled into a cold smile. Although his strength has already reached the sacred domain, he's still not my match. In a while, I'll let him know that even though we're both in the sacred domain, there's still a huge difference in strength. Oh? He just advanced to the sacred domain? Lettrel casually glanced at Ron. He's indeed a genius for advancing to the sacred domain at such a young age. However, a genius is a genius. But in front of us, he's still too inexperienced. Ram, you're right. It's not time for him to be arrogant. Lettrel and Ram were both sacred domain experts who had been famous for a long time. Compared to those who had just advanced to the sacred domain, they were many times stronger. Storm of Wind God Academy chuckled. Sir Ram, if you need help, just say the word. I've been annoyed with this kid ever since he came. I'll teach him how to behave properly later. Knowing that the other party was a kid who had just entered the sacred domain, Storm naturally wouldn't give up the opportunity to beat him up. No need. Lom smiled, waved his hand and said, My two friends, I appreciate your kind intentions, but as for this stinking brat, I can deal with him alone. He came at the right time. My new holy sword hasn't shed any blood yet, so I can use him as a sacrifice. Ha ha ha. Reynolds' face became extremely distorted. He stared at Ron as if he was about to spit fire. Ron, today is Kadena and my big day. What are you trying to do by coming here to ruin it? Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you've reached the sacred domain. Open your dog eyes and look carefully. You're not the only sacred domain expert here. Ron sneered and said rudely, Reynold, who do you think you are? What right do you have to talk to me? You're just relying on your father's strength in the sacred domain to intimidate me. Ron's words poked at Reynolds' sore spot. No one would be able to stand being slapped in the face in front of so many people. Reynolds' handsome face turned the color of a pig's liver. His lips trembled and he was unable to speak. Ram knew that he had to stand up and say something. He slowly stood up and took a step forward. A powerful aura was instantly released, and his robe fluttered even though there was no wind. Ron, today is my son and Kadena's big day. It's also a grand occasion for the Kingdom of Doro. How many experts are here to watch the ceremony? Don't you think you're going too far by causing trouble here? Ron laughed and said coldly, Going too far? I really don't know who's going too far. Kadena and I are truly in love. But you, venomous manticore Night Ram, you imprisoned the King of Doro, seized his throne, and even threatened to marry his daughter to your own son. Ram, as a powerhouse of the sacred domain and the guardian of the Kingdom of Doro, do you even know how to write the word shame? Many people were clear about these matters, but none of them dared to say it out loud. But Ron exposed his hypocritical face in front of so many people, making Ram unable to raise his head in front of so many experts. At this moment, Ram's face was completely gloomy. His eyes shone with a frightening ominous glint, as if he wanted to tear Ron to shreds. At this time, Kadena suddenly moved. A trace of water element fluctuation appeared on her body. This was the sign that the magic teleport was about to be released. "What are you doing?" Reynolds was startled and flew into a rage. He reached out and grabbed, interrupting Kadena's casting and forcibly pulling her back. "Let go of me, I want to find Ron." Kadena struggled, but how could she break free from Reynolds's large hands that were like iron clamps? "Damn, you slut, you actually want to find that brat. Let me tell you, Kadena, you are destined to be my woman. You're not allowed to take even a single step," Reynolds roared. "Kadena!" The commotion here naturally couldn't escape Ron's notice. His eyes swept over. "Let go of me, you're hurting me," Kadena shouted. At this moment she seemed to have gone mad, kicking and biting Reynolds. "Ron, quickly come and save me." Kadena couldn't break free and could only ask Ron for help. "You little bitch!" Reynolds was caught off guard and was bitten by Kadena. He immediately flew into a rage. He raised his hand and was about to scratch Kadena's flawless face. Suddenly, Reynolds heard his father's anxious voice. "Reynolds, watch out!" Reynolds only saw a blur in front of him. He didn't know when Ron's figure appeared in front of him. He saw him pull Kadena into his arms. At the same time, he waved his hand and a black mist flashed in his palm. White bone cage. A cage made of bones that was taller than a person suddenly stretched out from the ground. Like the devil's claws, it firmly locked Reynolds inside. What's worse was that the white bone cage was densely packed with sharp bone spikes. They were like sharp knives, piercing into his body and causing him to bleed profusely. "Ouch!" Reynolds howled in pain. Dozens of bone spikes suddenly pierced through his body. Although he desperately resisted with the flame armor, there were still dozens of bone spikes that pierced into his arms and thighs. Although they weren't vital parts, it was enough to make him want to die. "Bastard brat, don't hurt my son!" Reynolds's father, Ram, was like an angry lion. He fiercely pounced over and punched at Ron. Bang! A loud sound was heard, but Ram missed his target. Ron's body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. Even Kadena was nowhere to be seen. On top, Ram suddenly raised his head and narrowed his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Ron's figure had already appeared on the bone dragon's back. Kadena was also with him. Their speed was incomparable. "This brat is so fast." Seeing this scene, Ram couldn't help but be shocked. In a competition of speed, he obviously suffered a hidden disadvantage. "Ron!" Kadena cried and threw herself into Ron's arms. It's okay." Ron gently hugged her and comforted her in a soft voice. At this moment, Reynolds also broke free from the control of the bone cage. But at this moment, his whole body was covered in blood. His gorgeous groom's clothes also had holes in them. Ron limped over to his father's side. His eyes were filled with hatred. He, his father, and the entire Doro kingdom would be ridiculed by the entire Noah continent. It would be a lie to say that he didn't hate Ron. "Father, kill him. You must kill him for me." Reynolds roared, "This brat, I don't want to see him alive in this world." "You don't need to say that," Ram coldly said. He took a deep breath and his eyes were filled with killing intent. "Ron, you must die today. I definitely won't allow you to leave the Doro kingdom alive." Finished speaking, he waved his hand and a hexagram summoning magic array slowly opened on the ground. A huge poison scorpion lion jumped out from it and roared. Its body was a size smaller than the bone dragon, but it was extremely strong. Its muscles bulged, and it emitted a ferocious aura like that of a ferocious beast. At the same time, Ram reached into his space bag and a black long sword appeared in his hand. That was a sword-type sacred tool. It emitted a powerful aura. This sacred sword was called Bloodthirsty King. It had the ability to absorb blood. It could kill and injure the opponent and use the opponent's blood to replenish its own strength. It was incomparably powerful. Haha, His Majesty is really angry. This time, the guy who only looks impressive is going to be in trouble. A soldier laughed gloatingly. Let's take a good look at how that dragon-like skeleton fights. Another soldier chuckled. Ron's hand flashed and the dragonbone staff appeared in his hand. His black necromancer robe fluttered and his eyes burned with fighting spirit. Come, Ram. You and your son Renaud have repeatedly caused trouble for me. Today, I'll settle the old and new grudges together. Go to hell. Ram's eyes shone brightly. The poisoned scorpion lion beneath him roared and flapped its wings, rising into the air. Unlike Ron, he was a true knight. With the poisoned scorpion lion as his mount, his strength was greatly increased. With the addition of the sacred sword, Bloodthirsty King, Ram's strength far surpassed the average powerhouse of the sacred domain. It was no wonder that he had the confidence to kill Ron on the spot. Come! Ron's eyes turned dark green. He waved his staff and the abyssal bone dragon roared and pressed its huge body down. Boom! The two beasts collided with each other and exploded with a deafening sound. The ground shook and the entire viewing platform began to collapse. How is this possible? It was a miscalculation, a complete miscalculation. Apart from those who already knew Ron's background, no one had expected that the skeleton thing would actually erupt with such powerful combat strength. Not only did it block Ram's attack, it even seemed to have the upper hand. Impossible! Ram's eyes widened in shock. He saw the huge bone dragon's claws pressing against the tip of his sword. Ron had only used the strength of a single bone dragon to block his and the poisoned scorpion lion's joint attack. A single bone dragon was actually this strong. How is this possible? Is this a necromancer? That bone dragon's combat strength is comparable to a real dragon. Too scary. Everyone watching below was stunned, including Thunder Academy's Lettrel and the others. They were all shocked by this huge creature. This was a bone dragon, a real undead creature. It wasn't the skeleton summoned by the necromancers of the Noah continent. That bone dragon truly had the strength of the sacred domain. And this necromancer wasn't some trash profession. He was mysterious, powerful, and terrifying. He wasn't weaker than any sacred domain expert. He might even be stronger than them. Facing this completely unknown power, the powerhouses of the sacred domain who came to watch the ceremony were stunned. The soldiers of the Doro kingdom panicked. They scattered in all directions and the situation began to spiral out of control. Ram, I overestimated you. I didn't think you couldn't even defeat the abyssal bone dragon I summoned. Since that's the case, die. Chapter 537. Black Flame's Dragon Breath. The dragon breath spat out by the bone dragon was extremely hot. Those black flames were jumping around like maggots attached to bones. Once they were touched, they would not be able to escape. The tyrannical power of the bone dragon greatly shocked Ram. He rode on the poisoned scorpion lion and quickly retreated. His body was burned by the black flames, and he was in an extremely sorry state. The sacred domain, also known as the Grand Necromancer Magus, was the critical point of the necromancer profession. Once they broke through, their strength would increase exponentially. When they could summon a bone dragon, they would far surpass other professions. Only now did Ron understand this point. He was only at the early stage of the sacred domain. Just a bone dragon was able to beat Ram, who was at the mid-stage of the sacred domain, into such a sorry state. Pratt, Montegat, and Hill exchanged glances. Their eyes were filled with shock. Ron's strength was far beyond their imagination. Is he really an expert who has just advanced to the sacred domain? Hill muttered. Ron, you have finally reached the sacred domain. You are indeed very powerful. You did not disappoint me. Morin's beautiful eyes flickered. She was deeply impressed by Ron's strength. Ron, you are so powerful. Kadena opened her beautiful eyes wide. She quietly stared at the bone dragon. The bone dragon displayed its might. Ram and his poisoned scorpion lion were not its match. Your strength has actually reached such a level. Of course. Ron faintly smiled and said, if I did not have this strength, the one who would die today would be me. He paused for a moment before continuing, but, even if I die, I will save you, Ron said resolutely. Ron. Kadena was moved. She threw herself into Ron's embrace and tightly hugged him. Only after a while did she let go. Kadena looks at Ram with intense hatred in her eyes. Ron, you must help me kill him. In order to seize the Doro kingdom, he killed many of my family members. Don't worry, he won't live past today. Ron's eyes flashed with killing intent. Impossible. Impossible. Ron has only just advanced to the sacred domain. How can he be so powerful? Ram held the black, bloodthirsty king longsword in his hand. The light of the holy sword completely covered him, and together with his mount, the poisoned scorpion lion, he exploded with a powerful strength. Unfortunately, no matter how he struggled, he was at a disadvantage. The abyssal bone dragon summoned by the Grand Necromancer was just too powerful. Roar. The bone dragon let out a long roar as it spread its wings and pounced towards Ram. As it breathed out its dragon breath, a tyrannical black flame burned the horizon. Gravity confinement. Llama made up his mind and let out a loud roar. A powerful aura soared into the sky, and a black earth power burst out from his body. At this moment, Ram used his domain. What? He actually forced Ram to use his domain? Thunder Academy's headmaster Lettrel frowned. This youth's strength isn't simple. Wind God Academy's headmaster Storm said in a deep voice, I'm afraid we'll have to make a move soon. The two looked at each other and saw a trace of tacit understanding in each other's eyes. The three of them were close friends. Just like Platts, Montego, and Hill, they formed a small group or a small alliance. In the alliance, they would advance and retreat together. It was very simple. If you didn't help others this time, others wouldn't help you next time. Then this so-called alliance could only be disbanded. Finally using your domain? But unfortunately, it's useless. Ron coldly smiled. He waved his right hand and the eyes of the dragon head on the dragon bone staff lit up. Death coil. Countless blue soul strands condensed into a cloud of smoke that constantly drifted. Within the smoke, a sinister skull could faintly be seen. Death coil was a forbidden spell recorded in the Book of Death. It didn't belong to the category of necromancy magic, but rather came from a higher level of comprehension. After Ron obtained the Book of Death, he had a deeper understanding of Death Coil. The Death Coil he used this time was even more powerful than before. As Ram's domain expanded, Death Coil twisted like a snake. It was like an illusory smoke that shuttled back and forth within Ram's domain. How is this possible? Ram was completely stunned. He stared blankly as that blue smoke rapidly approached. That wasn't a physical smoke. It was formed from Ron's consciousness and couldn't be resisted by physical attacks. Bang! The blue smoke smashed into Ram's face, followed by a miserable cry. That sound was like a howl from hell, incomparably miserable. His soul suffered a heavy blow from Ron, causing him to spurt out blood. Then, Ram fell down like a meteor. Father! Renault's guts were torn apart. Cough, cough, cough. Ram clutched his chest in pain. His mouth was full of blood, and his eyes were filled with fatigue. Everything was over. Seeing this scene, everyone sighed in their hearts. Yes, Ram was defeated. The tyrannical venomous scorpion lion knight was defeated. Although he was unwilling to admit it, Ram had indeed lost to Ron, who was only at the initial level of the sacred domain. Ram used his hand to support his holy sword and stood up shakily, almost falling down. He slowly raised his head, calmly looking at Ron, who was slowly descending from the sky. His face carried a trace of fear. Thud, thud. Renaud knelt in front of Thunder Academy's Dean Lettrel, sobbing as he pleaded, "Sir Dean, please save my father." Lettrel looked at the distant Ron and silently nodded. "Ram, your time of death has come." Ron's face didn't have the slightest trace of emotion as he calmly said, "Little bastard. I should have killed you long ago." Ram gnashed his teeth and said. At this moment, he was so regretful that his intestines were turning green. If he had cast aside all his worries and killed Ron earlier, all these things wouldn't have happened. "Unfortunately, you won't have the chance anymore." Ron faintly smiled and said, "Originally, I didn't have any grudges with you. Today's consequences were all brought upon by you." With a wave of the dragon bone staff, a light green mass of air instantly formed. This was the death coil from earlier. When Ram saw it, his expression immediately changed. "Stop!" At this time, a shout was heard. It was Thunder Academy's Dean Lettrel. He walked forward with a gloomy face. "Kid, don't go too far." "Right. Don't tell me you still want to kill?" Wind God Academy's Storm also fiercely said. "Who are you?" Ron looked at the two sacred domain powerhouses in front of him and frowned slightly. Thunder Academy's Dean Lettrel. Wind God Academy's Dean Storm. At this time, Lettrel's expression relaxed and he said amiably, "Sir Ron, you've already done enough. Since you've already saved the people you should save, you should leave." Reynolds was startled when he heard this. "Dean, you..." Lettrel immediately waved his hand and stopped Reynolds from speaking. He smiled and said, "Sir Ron, if we shed all pretenses of cordiality, it won't be good for anyone. How about we stop here?" At this time, Lettrel and Storm both stepped forward and released an invisible pressure. They stood together with Ram, protecting him in the middle. This meant that if they shed all pretenses of cordiality, they would join hands to attack Ron. In addition to Ram, who was injured but still able to fight, there were a total of 3 sacred domain powerhouses. 3 against 1. Ron, who was only at the initial stage of the Saint stage, didn't have much of a chance of winning. Just as the two of them were confident that Ron would back down under the pressure of the two of them suddenly stopped. Ron coldly smiled and rolled his eyes. "Who do you think you are? You think you have the qualifications to tell me to stop?" "What?" Facing Ron's merciless reprimand, Lettrel and Storm simply couldn't believe their ears. They had seen arrogant people before, but never to this extent. Facing the pressure of 3 sacred domain powerhouses, Ron actually chose to resist. "Ron, don't go too far." Lettrel shouted coldly. "There's a limit to my patience." Ron coldly smiled and stretched out 3 fingers. "Today, I came here mainly for 3 things. First, release the House of King Doro and return the throne to King Doro. Second, declare the marriage between Reynolds and Cadena invalid. Third." Ron paused and swept his gaze towards Ram and Reynolds, his eyes revealing deep killing intent. Ram and his son must die. Ron's words were earth-shattering, shocking everyone. A sacred domain powerhouse threatening to kill another sacred domain powerhouse, this was rarely seen in the Noah continent. Lettrel was truly angered. "Good, very good. Ron, since you've said so, I won't be polite. Prepare to suffer the wrath of the 3 of us." Ron contemptuously smiled. "Only 3? Even if there are more than 2, I'm not afraid. Whoever wants to stand up for Ram and his son, step forward. I'll settle it in one go." As he spoke, he swept his gaze towards the viewing platform. Among the guests, there was no lack of sacred domain powerhouses. The entire viewing platform quieted down. Many of the guests were Ram's close friends, some of whom had even adventured in other planes while carrying out missions. However, when they saw the abyssal bone dragon roaring in the sky, they hesitated. At this moment, Prats faintly smiled. Ron, you're the most promising student in our academy, and also a necromancy instructor. Our Balarax Academy will naturally stand on your side. Sir Dean. Ron smiled. He had a good impression of Prats. When he was weak, Prats had protected him. Forgive Ron for not being able to salute you, but this student can still deal with such a small matter. Sir Dean, please stand to the side and watch. Prats faintly smiled. He stood up and slowly walked to the side. Montgot and Hill also stood up and followed Prats to the side, drawing a clear line between them and Ram. Ron. Miss Morin leisurely stood up and said to Ron, in terms of personal friendship, I naturally should stand with you, but today, I'm representing the Beastman Empire, so I declare my neutrality. Thank you, Miss Morin. Ron has the ability to deal with it. Ron faintly smiled and lightly nodded. Hearing that the Beastman Empire was neutral, the other sacred domain powerhouses' minds also became active. They all stood on the side of neutrality and watched the show, not helping either side. Letral's expression was very ugly. This way, only the two of them would fight alongside Ram. Ron's eyes contained a cold intent and he loudly said, The two of you, today I swear to kill Ram and his son. If you don't step aside, don't blame me for being impolite. Letral angrily said, What an arrogant brat. Come if you have the ability. I don't believe that you can deal with the three of us by yourself. Ron's eyes were filled with killing intent as he waved his staff. Those who block me will die. Chapter 538. Headmaster Letral of Thunder Academy was a swordsman. To be more precise, he was a sword saint. However, his weapon wasn't a sword, but rather a two-handed sledgehammer. Just like a paladin, his tall stature complemented the dark gold sledgehammer perfectly. He cultivated in the power of lightning, which was relatively rare in the Noah continent. The dean of the Aeolus Academy, Storm, was a thief, a saint-level thief who had been bestowed with the title of Killing Saint. He wielded two small daggers in his hands that flickered like vipers. Thieves were also the nemesis of mages. To these classes that didn't have any armor, once a thief got close to them, they would die without a grave. In their opinion, the three of them working together was more than enough to deal with Ron, who had just entered the sacred domain. Although the other party's strength was incomparably strange, as long as they were careful, they could always deal with him. Terror Knight. Skeleton Magus. Skeleton Hero. Ron summoned a large number of undead creatures in a single breath. In an instant, numerous undead creatures drilled out from the ground. Countless gargoyles also appeared in the sky. In addition to the terrifying abyssal skeletal dragon, they formed a huge undead army. Be careful, these undead creatures aren't simple at all, Ram loudly warned. He had long since put away his contempt for Ron. The heavy iron hooves of the Terror Knight stomped on the ground, emitting a dull thud. The skeleton magus condensed magic and shot magic into the air one after another. At this time, the densely packed skeleton hero also began to charge. The powerful abyssal skeletal dragon breathed out a powerful dragon breath. Kill! Letral, Storm, and Ram shouted. The three of them shot out like arrows and madly pounced on the undead army. Thunder's Fury. A huge two-handed sledgehammer slammed into the ground, bursting into beautiful sparks. The chaotic electricity crackled as the surrounding undead creatures were electrocuted into charcoal in an instant. With Letral's strength, ordinary skeleton warriors couldn't cause him any trouble. Meanwhile, Storm shuttled through the undead army. His target wasn't the undead creatures. Instead, he was looking for an opportunity to deal a fatal blow to Ron. Ram, on the other hand, held back the abyssal skeletal dragon and fought against the most terrifying undead creature in the history of the Noah continent. The intense battle shook the surroundings. Even the viewing platform began to collapse. Huge rocks were swept up by the force and rose into the air. Other than those from the sacred domain, all the powerhouses had retreated far away. If they were not careful, they would be drawn into the vortex of battle and be ground into nothingness by the powerful domain power. The battle reached its climax as soon as it began. Ram and the other two joined forces, and with the same powerful sacred domain strength, they slowly regained the advantage they had lost. As the undead creatures disappeared one by one, the situation became more and more unfavorable for Ron. Seeing Ron fail, Kadena couldn't help but worry. Seems like it's still too much. Hill, the King of Hope, shook his head. Old geezer, do you think we should go and help him? Heh, since when did you become so enthusiastic? Platts raised his eyes slightly and looked at Hill in surprise. Then, he glanced at Ron and muttered, Don't worry, Ron should be able to hold on for a while. Let's wait and see. Don't act rashly. Intense hatred shot out from Renault's eyes. He hated Ron for destroying everything he had. To him, Kadena was his everything. Renault wanted to tear Ron into pieces, but he didn't have the ability to intervene in the battle between the powerhouses of the sacred domain. He could only watch helplessly. Ron, I will definitely kill you. Not only that, your family and friends will all be buried with you. Just you wait. Renault swore in his heart. However, Renault didn't know that Ron's mother was one of the dragons. If he knew, he wouldn't have dared to kill anyone on Dragon Island even if he had 10 times the courage. Ha ha ha, Ron, in the end, you are still not a match for the three of us. Apart from the abyssal black dragon, when the last undead creature turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared, Ram saw that the situation was already set and laughed wildly. Laratal sneered and waved his sledgehammer. Hee hee, you want to surrender? Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. You have offended the three of us. Today you are destined to die. Hee hee, is that so? Ron sneered. Then I will let you see my true strength. At this time, Ron's eyes suddenly turned purple. That was the sign that his soul force had reached its peak. He raised his dragon bone staff and a powerful aura pressed down. Death Decay. This was the second undead spell recorded in the Book of Death. It was also the result of Ron's latest comprehension. It was extremely powerful and couldn't be compared to the strengthened version of Death Coil. As soon as Death Decay was used, the space began to surge. It was as if a demon had descended. The whole world was filled with an intense aura of death. Boom, boom, boom. On the ground, a black mist appeared. With Ron as the center, it continuously spread out. The aura of death was filled with a depraved and corrosive aura. It was like a plague that polluted the whole space. For a moment, an earth-shattering aura of death emerged and squeezed towards the center. It was like a terrifying beast that was devouring the world and shattering space. Wherever the black mist went, the flowers and grass withered. The ground seemed to have been polluted and turned into black block. Traces of cyan smoke seeped out. The bright sky also darkened and the air was filled with an intense aura of death. As soon as Death Decay was used, the whole viewing platform turned into a world of death. Even the powerhouses of the sacred domain, who were watching from the periphery, retreated one after another for fear of being affected. On the contrary, the remaining undead creatures within the range of Death Decay had obtained huge benefits. Their injured bodies were as good as new and their exhausted fighting strength was restored. All the undead creatures opened their mouths and greedily inhaled the aura of death around them. Careful! The expressions of Letral, Ram, and the others changed. The power of the spell Ron used was far beyond their imagination. This was the power of death that had comprehended a higher law. Earth Armor! Thunder Shield! Phantom Doppelganger! In a moment of desperation, the three powerhouses of the sacred domain used their strongest defensive skills to resist the terrifying aura of death. Ram's body was covered in a thick layer of black armor. This was the strongest defense formed by earth elemental energy. At this moment, he looked like a steel giant wearing heavy armor. Ram expanded his domain to the maximum, strenuously resisting the corrosive aura of death coming from outside. At this time, Ram felt the earth armor tremble slightly. Crack! A tiny crack appeared on the armor of earth. The crack spread out like a spider web, and soon it spread all over his body. Not good. Ram's expression changed greatly. At this moment it was too late for him to dodge. He was in the range of death decay and had nowhere to run. Not only Ram, but even Lettrel and Storm were in the same situation. Their defensive power was shattered, especially Storm, who had the weakest defensive power. A strong corrosive aura of death had already spread to his body, making sizzling sounds. Seeing the three powerhouses completely suppressed by death decay, Ron's lips curled into a smile. Don't kill me. Lettrel was extremely regretful at this moment. If he had known that the other party was so powerful, he wouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. Now, in order to stand up for his friend, he had paid with his life. It's too late to beg for mercy now. Die. Ron didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. He expanded death decay to the maximum, and death decay suddenly expanded, engulfing the three powerhouses in an instant. The onlookers were dumbfounded. They were shocked by Ron's tyrannical power. The monstrous power created by death withering was even more powerful than the power of elemental magic forbidden spells. For the first time, they experienced the true terror of necromancy magic. It was a power filled with depravity, death, strangeness, mystery, terror, and darkness. It could devour the heavens and devour the earth, exterminate everything, corrode everything, and destroy everything. Clang! Clang! With Ron as the core, the surrounding area became deathly silent. The entire viewing platform was flattened. Wherever the black fog went, not even a blade of grass grew. Countless rocks slid down and fell to the ground, turning into a pile of powder. It's over. Looking at the place where the death decay had wreaked havoc, everyone secretly sighed in relief. However, they all had the same question in their minds. Were those people still alive? The black fog gradually dissipated, revealing the true appearance inside. At a glance, everyone was stunned. There were several weapons and armors scattered on the ground, which were used by the three powerhouses. Apart from Ram's bloodthirsty king one-handed sword, everything else had been corroded beyond recognition. The corpses of the three powerhouses had all disappeared into the air. Dead. They're all dead. Under the might of Ron's death decay, the three powerhouses of the sacred domain had all died an unnatural death. Not even their bones remained. Everyone was dumbfounded. At this moment, Ron slowly descended from the sky. That black-robed figure gave everyone a great psychological pressure. At this moment, no one dared to look down on this thin and weak young man. He's very powerful, Montego admitted honestly. I thought they would lose, but I didn't expect them to lose so easily. The legendary necromancer is indeed not simple, Hill said in a low voice. It's all over, Platt said calmly. He looked to the other side. Renault's body went soft and he could barely stand. His teeth chattered and his whole body trembled. Plop, Renault knelt down again. This time, he wasn't kneeling to someone else, but to the necromancer that he had always wanted to kill but had always looked down on. Don't kill me. Renault became a pitiful worm at this moment. He begged, I'll give you everything. Don't kill me. The surroundings quieted down. Everyone looked over. Some people looked at Renault with sympathy, but they knew that this person's life was in the hands of that powerful young man. Kadena also couldn't bear it. She looked at Ron with a questioning gaze. Ron was unmoved. He took a step forward and said coldly, You've already lost the right to bargain with me. As soon as Ron's voice fell, there was a bang sound, and a long sword pierced out of Renault's body. A skeleton hero had appeared behind Reynolds at some point in time. It had used a longsword to stab Reynolds in the heart. Originally, the skeleton hero wasn't strong enough to ambush Reynolds, but Reynolds's pride was on the verge of collapse. Due to his carelessness, the attack had succeeded. Renaud looked at the long sword in his chest in disbelief. Blood dyed his armor red. He twisted a few times and finally fell down unwillingly. The Ramus father and son, who had been arrogant for a while, were killed by Ron, becoming his first sacrifice to step into the sanctuary. At this moment, the abyss skeletal dragon let out a long roar. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw that Ron had already mounted the skeletal dragon. Chapter 539. The Ram father and son were killed, and the bride was taken away. The guests who came to attend the wedding felt bored and left one after another, including the sacred domain experts on the viewing platform. "Let's go." Prats looked at the chaotic wedding scene and said to Montigot and Hill, "There's no point in staying any longer." "That's right," Montigot said. Hill pondered for a moment. "Old Ghost, now that your student has advanced to the sacred domain, I think we should try to rope him in? There's no hurry." Prats quietly stared in the direction Ron left and smiled. "Soon, he'll come looking for us." As soon as Ron left, the soldiers and generals loyal to the Doro royal family rushed into the prison and rescued the Doro king. Relying on the many years of management and prestige of the Doro royal family, as well as the Doro king's skillful political methods, he quickly calmed down the chaos as soon as he came out. The traitorous generals were punished, and the generals who were coerced were demoted. The situation quickly stabilized. The Ram dynasty that had existed for a short few months was declared destroyed. In the royal palace of the Kingdom of Doro, it was a scene of devastation. One side of the wall had already collapsed, revealing a huge crack. The rockery in the middle had obvious traces of being burnt. However, the building that had been passed down for hundreds of years still stood tall after 2 consecutive periods of chaos and upheaval. In the main hall of the royal palace, the Doro king, who had just been reinstated, sat on the throne in the middle, dealing with complicated government affairs. However, there was something more important that troubled him. Kadena had gone missing. The Doro king quietly listened to the report, his brows furrowed. After a long while, he asked, "Kadena still hasn't been found?" "Yes, she was taken away from the wedding scene by Ron." A man who looked like a general said. "His Highness Prince Locke has already led the Eagle Corps to chase after her. I don't know if he can catch up to her." Prince Locke was the son of King Doro and Kadena's brother. He was the appointed successor of the Doro kingdom. The falcons he led were the elite troops of the Doro kingdom. Those warriors riding giant falcons were the nightmare of the enemy on the battlefield. That being said, everyone understood that even if Prince Locke managed to catch up to them, he might not be able to bring them back. The other party was a peerless powerhouse who could kill Ram, Lettrel and Storm at the same time. He could only use his status as her brother to persuade his sister. "Your Majesty, you don't need to worry too much." A beautiful middle-aged woman sitting to the side gently squeezed King Doro's hand and softly consoled him. Every movement of the beautiful woman was filled with a luxurious aura. It was just that she had just come out of prison, so her face was somewhat pale. She was the queen of the Doro kingdom, Kadena's mother. Queen Doro lightly bit her red lips and hesitantly said, "Perhaps this isn't a bad thing. As far as I know, Kadena and that person are truly in love." When these words came out, the entire palace quieted down. King Doro also remained silent. The queen was also somewhat apprehensive. As a mother, how could she not know her daughter's thoughts? However, if it was in the past, her husband would fly into a rage at the mention of this. Today, however, he was unusually silent. Sigh. After a while, King Doro finally sighed, as if he had aged several decades. "Let Locke come back. Don't chase." "Yes," a high-ranking officer responded. Eagle Corps had a special method of communication that could call Prince Locke back. Queen Doro lightly sighed in relief. Without the sharp sword that was Ram hanging over her head, this matter would be much easier to handle. Now we must have a proper discussion. King Doro composed himself, stood up, and said in a clear voice, "Perhaps our kingdom of Doro will soon face a crisis." Crisis, yes, crisis. When the ministers heard this, they understood. Ram was dead. The powerhouse of the sacred domain guarding the kingdom of Doro had died. Doro had lost its protection and might soon face the military attack of other countries. At this time, a Doro soldier hurriedly ran in. Reporting. Scylla Kingdom has deployed 8 legions at the northern border. They seem to be ready to attack us at any time. Reporting. Beach Kingdom soldiers are rapidly gathering. According to news, they might take military action against us. Reporting. Korea Kingdom's main force is moving towards the border. Their goal is unknown. Reporting. Military intelligence flew in like snowflakes. Hearing this news, the Kingdom of Doro and the ministers were stunned. These countries were in the same region as the Kingdom of Doro. There were spies and spies there. Some had even infiltrated the military. If there was any movement, those countries would definitely know. It seemed that those countries had already received the news of Ram's death and were ready to make a move. In the next moment, they would take military action against the Kingdom of Doro that had lost its protector. The Kingdom of Doro was rich and located at a strategic location. The surrounding countries were all poor and small countries. Some of them did not even have a protector. Now that the Kingdom of Doro had lost its protector, those greedy countries coveted the wealth of the Kingdom of Doro and naturally wanted a share of the profits. Bah! Bastards! These damn bastards! King Doro held the battle report and was so angry that his entire body trembled. Without a protector, those countries that he usually looked down on were all bullying him. It could be seen how important a protector was to a kingdom. Although Ram was arrogant and despotic, he was able to protect the peace of the Kingdom of Doro. After losing him, the Kingdom of Doro was faced with one crisis after another. Only then did those ministers understand that Ram's existence was not a good thing. But losing him was a big bad thing. What should we do now? The ministers were suddenly in chaos. Their eyes were filled with fear. The Kingdom of Doro had never experienced a situation where they had lost their protector. At this moment, they were caught unprepared. At this moment, King Doro was the calmest person. He quickly pondered for a moment before standing up and sternly saying, "Pass down the order. All the legions are to prepare for battle. Pay close attention to every movement at the border. Use the attitude of war to deal with any crisis. At the same time, immediately issue a conscription order. Males between 18 to 40 years old are to join the Doro army. Third, the Central Army is to immediately assemble and prepare for battle." Yes, the military order was passed down in an orderly manner. In a moment, the entire upper echelon of the army was mobilized. The hearts of the Doro army that had been messed up by Ram were once again united to resist the foreign invaders. Also, post a recruitment notice and invite any sacred domain expert of the Noah continent to become the new protector of our Kingdom of Doro. The price is... King Doro paused and fiercely clenched his teeth. Half of the wealth of the Kingdom of Doro, and 30% of the annual tax revenue. Ah! The ministers were shocked by this news. Half of the wealth of the Kingdom of Doro and 30% of the annual tax revenue. Just how big of a price was that? They reckoned that no one would be able to pay such a high price. The hall buzzed as those greedy ministers protested. The wealth of the kingdom was one thing, but 30% of the annual tax revenue was simply asking for their lives. Don't, Your Majesty, calm down. Isn't this price too big? Your Majesty, please reconsider. No need to say any more. King Doro was also enraged. He slapped the table and stood up, roaring, "You guys, I don't care how much you usually plunder, but the worst part is that at the critical moment, you guys are completely useless. You can't even come up with a single idea. Rice buckets, all of you are rice buckets. When King Doro got angry, those ministers immediately kept quiet out of fear, not daring to make a sound. King Doro heavily snorted. He waved his hand. Go and pass down the order. Bone erotic novel. The dragon's huge bone wings glided across the horizon, passing through the clouds. The whole way was filled with laughter. Ron and Kadena were sitting on the back of the bone dragon. Kadena's face was red as she threw herself into Ron's embrace and lightly hugged his neck. Ron, thank you. What are you saying, fool? Ron lovingly patted her head. Sorry, baby, I came a bit late and made you suffer. Kadena heavily shook her head. As long as I'm with you, I won't feel bitter. Kadena was wearing a white wedding dress. Like a shy bride, she snuggled into Ron's embrace and sweetly smiled. Her heart was already filled with happiness. Kadena, you're so beautiful. Ron glanced at Kadena and was attracted by her beauty. He praised from the bottom of his heart. Thank you, Kadena said with a smile. Speaking of which, Ron naughtily smiled and gently pinched her soft waist. You're wearing such a beautiful dress today, don't tell me you already knew that you're going to marry me? You're so naughty. Hearing this, Kadena's face suddenly turned red. She raised her small fist and fiercely hammered Ron a few times. Ron laughed heartily and the two quickly hugged each other again. Sitting on the bone dragon's back, Ron tightly hugged Kadena in his embrace and said softly, Kadena, don't worry, we'll be together and never separate. Suddenly, a soft sobbing sound came from his embrace. Ron lowered his head to look and saw Kadena's shoulders heaving up and down as she cried sadly. Kadena, what's wrong? Ron was greatly alarmed. He cupped Kadena's beautiful face and asked. I. Kadena lowered her head as tears gently rolled down. I'm worried about father and mother, I'm worried about Doro Kingdom, I'm afraid. Ron stretched out his hand to gently wipe away Kadena's tears and said with a smile, What's so difficult about that? Ron put away the bone dragon and the two landed in a bustling medium-sized city. When the two landed, Kadena's beautiful appearance attracted the gazes of many people. Fortunately, there was Ron, an expert of the sacred domain, otherwise there would have already been people trying to strike up a conversation. Ron ignored them and walked straight into a trading company. As long as there were gold coins, this trading company would do anything for you. At the counter of the trading company, Ron picked up a pen and wrote a few words on a piece of paper and handed it to the attendant of the trading company. Send it to the Doro Kingdom's palace. Send it to His Majesty the Doro King. Yes, honored guest. The attendant nodded politely and said, I'll arrange for someone to send it over as soon as possible. From time to time, he sized up Kadena. Let me see. Kadena snatched Ron's slip of paper. After reading it, her eyes lit up and she shouted, Ron, you're the best. After saying that, she suddenly hugged him and kissed Ron's face fiercely. Doro Kingdom's palace was gloomy as if a storm was coming. Everyone's heart felt like it was being pressed down by a heavy rock. King Doro sat upright on the throne. His hair was messy and his eyes were lifeless. He had already lost his former elegance and majesty of a king. He held a large stack of battle reports in his hand and his face was gloomy. Those few countries had already sent their armies to attack. The north, south, east, all lines had been lost. The kingdom's army that had just passed through the chaotic period was not the opponent of the well-equipped enemy. At this moment, the situation was extremely dangerous. King Doro had not had a good sleep for several days already. Your Majesty! At this moment, a minister stepped forward and said, What's the matter? King Doro asked. The northern line of defense has already fallen. I know. King Doro weakly nodded and fell into silence again. After a while, he said in a hoarse voice, Still haven't found the protectors? No. The minister sighed. No one is willing to come here to act as our protectors and protect us. Because they are afraid of being involved in trouble. Sigh. King Doro heavily sighed. In these past few days, he had sighed countless times. This showed his helplessness towards the situation. Reporting to Your Majesty, we received a letter from the trading company. It's specifically for you. At this moment, a soldier rushed in and saluted. Let me see. King Doro nodded and took the letter. He opened it and read. Suddenly, King Doro's eyes opened wide. His slightly fat body trembled. His face was filled with excitement. It was as if all the haze in his heart had been swept away. Even the sky became bright. Ha ha ha! King Doro suddenly laughed. Good! Very good! Very good! The ministers looked at each other in dismay, not understanding what was going on. A courageous minister asked, Your Majesty, what made you so happy? King Duoluo stood up with a swish, waving the piece of paper as he excitedly said, Come, spread this news for me, tell everyone. That minister took the piece of paper and read it. There was only one line of words on it. Iran. I am willing to become the protector of Doro Kingdom. Your Majesty, this is... The minister was both surprised and happy. Doro Kingdom is saved. King Doro said with a smile. Suddenly, he fiercely stomped his foot and scolded, Ron, you bastard. You stole my daughter and became the guardian of the Doro Kingdom. What's the difference between your actions and llamas? Chapter 540. Within the borders of the Roland Empire, in an ordinary and small mercenary tavern, there were all kinds of mercenaries crowded in front of a notice board. The notice board listed all kinds of missions, and the magic characters on it were constantly changing, showing the latest missions. The mercenaries quietly stared at the magic characters on the notice board, their eyes shining with anticipation. Most of the mercenaries were travel-worn and in a hurry. Most of them had already accepted a mission. In the process, there was a saying among the mercenaries, if you're not doing a mission, then you're on the way to do a mission. After those penniless mercenaries completed their missions and received considerable rewards, they began to indulge in debauchery and lived a life of extravagance. Very quickly, they squandered away all the money they earned with their lives. Then, they became completely destitute of pornographic novels. Penniless, then went to do a mission. It was an endless cycle. That was life. The life of a mercenary. The mercenary tavern was such a place for mercenaries to pass time. Of course, it also had another function, and that was to be the place with the most up-to-date information in the Noah continent. At this moment, the mercenaries in the mercenary tavern were attracted by an explosive news. Hey! Did you hear? A 20-year-old boy became a powerhouse of the sacred domain. TCH, what's so strange about that? Your news is already outdated. Not only do I know that he became a powerhouse of the sacred domain, but I also know that he's called Ron. A wretched man said with a smile, I also know that that guy called Ron caused a ruckus in the kingdom of Doro's wedding. He killed the wedding host and the guardian of the kingdom of Doro, and kidnapped the bride in front of everyone. He. No way, he just advanced to the sacred domain, and he already killed 3 intermediate sacred domain powerhouses? A primary sacred domain powerhouse killed an intermediate sacred domain powerhouse? Impossible. What's his profession? I heard that he's a necromancer. What? Necromancer? Did I hear wrong? A trashy necromancer can actually kill a powerhouse of the sacred domain? Are you joking? No, not at all. On the contrary, everything I said is true. That young man called Ron isn't a toy summoned by those scammers we saw on the streets of the Roland Empire. He's the most mysterious and powerful necromancer in the legends. What? The legendary necromancy magic? But isn't this just a legend? The legends are all true. Let me tell you, don't tell anyone. According to reliable sources, the tricks on the streets are just unlearned. The true power of necromancy magic is not something you can imagine. That wretched-looking guy said seriously. Looking at the people around him who were listening attentively, as well as the people who were looking over with their ears pricked up, he couldn't help but feel a little proud. In the mercenary world, some people were not strong, but they were well-informed, experienced, and respected. The wretched man in front of him belonged to this category. In the kingdom of Doro, the news of Ron causing a ruckus at a wedding and killing 3 sacred domain powerhouses spread quickly, and the entire Noah continent was shaken. Everyone's first reaction when they heard this news was, impossible. A 20-year-old powerhouse of the sacred domain. A necromancer. 1 against 3. Killing a 3rd intermediate sacred domain powerhouse with the strength of a primary sacred domain powerhouse. All these factors combined to form a legend that was even more bizarre than a legend. In an instant, Ron's name spread across the entire continent. In the streets and alleys, Ron's heroic deeds were spread everywhere, becoming a hot topic among the mercenaries. Is this also the reason why that 20-year-old youth became a sacred domain powerhouse? A mercenary at a nearby table interrupted, shaking his head with a look of disbelief. I don't believe that such a genius exists. Even if there is, he would have been roped in by the major forces. It's impossible for him to remain unknown. Moreover, the legendary necromancy magic has disappeared for a long time. It's hard to say whether it's true or not. Taking a step back, even if it's true, where did this Ron guy learn necromancy magic? The wretched man was at a loss for words. His face flushed red, but he still defended himself. Of course it's true. The news I release is never false. Not only here, but the entire continent is abuzz with it. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. The mercenary snorted, stood up, and coldly said, "You're just following the crowd." After saying that, he ignored the crowd and walked out with large strides. This guy, if he's 1 step late, I'll teach him a lesson. That's right, look at how arrogant he is. The mercenary's attitude caused the crowd to be displeased, and some people called out to teach him a lesson. Forget it, let's drink. Why bother with him? The wretched man didn't bother arguing with him. Yes, let's drink, let's drink. As they spoke, bowls of inferior wine clinked together, and the mercenary tavern was filled with unbridled laughter. Bang! At this time, the wooden door of the mercenary tavern was opened, and 2 figures walked in. They looked like they were both women, and both were dressed professionally. One was a thief, and the other was a mage. They seemed to be in a hurry, as if they had rushed for a long time. "Boss, is there anything to eat? Hurry up, we're starving," the female thief shouted as soon as she entered the tavern, and then casually sat down at a table. "Hello, honorable guests, our mercenary tavern has everything you need. May I ask what you would like to order?" A waitress took the initiative to greet them. She curiously sized up the 2 people. Other than the female thief, the other female mage was wearing a hood, so people couldn't see her face clearly. The waitress bowed, which was considered a greeting to the guests. As soon as these people came in, they attracted the attention of many mercenaries. When they saw the 2 young women with good figures, their eyes lit up. The female thief's appearance naturally couldn't be described. Her petite body was wearing tight clothes, revealing her exquisite and curvaceous figure. The other female mage's face couldn't be seen clearly, but judging from her figure, she was obviously better than the female thief. Some of the mercenaries were already thinking of ways to flirt with her. "Sister, sit." The female thief pulled the female mage to sit down. The female mage quietly took off her hood, revealing a delicate and beautiful face. Her pair of bright eyes were shining, and her heroic spirit was compelling. Especially the noble aura that she inadvertently emitted, which made the vulgar people around her dumbfounded and salivate. The best, simply the best. Moreover, it was a noble female mage. Some of the mercenaries' hearts began to stir. "Sister, what would you like to eat?" the female thief asked the female mage. It seemed that they were sisters, and even their appearance was somewhat similar. "Anything," the female mage replied indifferently. At the same time, her pair of beautiful eyes scanned the surroundings. That kind of gaze made her very uncomfortable. "Oh, okay, 2 bottles of ale and 5 pounds of cooked beef will do," the female thief said. "No, I can't eat that much." The female mage frowned and said unhappily. Then a bottle of ale and 3 pounds of cooked beef." The female thief was stunned for a moment before saying, "We still have to hurry, so we can't drink." 3 pounds of cooked beef will do," the female mage said coldly. She was obviously in a bad mood. The female thief smiled a little awkwardly, and then said to the waitress, 3 pounds of cooked beef then. "Okay, customer, please wait a moment," the waitress said with a smile, and turned to go back to prepare. "Sister, is there a need to be so frugal? It's not like we don't have money." After the waitress left, the female thief muttered unhappily, "Even if you have money, you can't squander it," the female mage said coldly. "Besides, I can't eat it. These are all for you." "Okay." The female thief sighed and said, "Sister, I know that you're still troubled by that matter." The 2 girls were the thief Catherine and the mage Juliana. They were important figures in the Ebian rebels. At this moment, they were on their way back to Manchester through the Roland Empire. Catherine was fine, but Juliana looked like she had a lot on her mind. She sighed and said, "Isn't this still?" Sigh. Now, even Lord Elpha can't be relied on. Elpha was originally the special envoy of the Roland Empire. He had helped the rebels in Manchester open up a supply channel and took down the colored stone castle. However, since last month, the supplies had been gradually decreasing, and in the end, there were no supplies at all. Juliana smelled that something was wrong. She didn't dare to be negligent. She rushed to the imperial capital of the Roland Empire with Catherine overnight, and asked to see Special Envoy Elpha to find out what was going on. However, when they arrived at the imperial capital, they didn't even see him. Not only Elpha, but even some of the high-ranking officials that they usually met avoided meeting. At this time, Juliana finally understood that the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire must have reached some tacit agreement, and the Roland Empire turned around and sold them out. This was politics, naked politics. As long as there was a deal, anything could be sold out. Juliana had no choice but to rush back and think of a countermeasure. "Sister, according to reliable news, the Holy Roman Empire is preparing to make a move on us. They have sent more than 500,000 elite troops to the south in 3 directions, intending to destroy us in one fell swoop," Catherine said worriedly. "Even the Holy See is involved in this matter. I heard that they have sent a saintess to personally supervise the battle. I know all this. I also got the news, so I decided to rush back. It's a waste of time over there." Juliana looked bitter. Now that the Roland Empire's attitude is ambiguous, it's obvious that they don't want to interfere. "We can only think of another way." "Humph." Catherine was indignant. These sanctimonious fellows, when it comes to receiving gifts, they accept them quickly and fiercely, but when it comes to doing things, they're always making excuses. At the crucial moment, they're even more useless, Catherine blinked. "Sister, that Alpha also didn't help you? Lord Alpha doesn't want to see me at all. I'm afraid I can't count on anyone this time." Juliana sighed and said with a bitter smile, 500,000 soldiers, 500,000. I'm afraid that they can crush Manchester into powder." Catherine raised her head, her eyes flashing, and said hatefully, "Damn it, if only there was a powerhouse from the sacred domain among us, then the Holy Roman Empire wouldn't dare to be arrogant with us." As the 2 sisters were talking, suddenly a handsome young mercenary at the next table stood up, picked up a bowl of wine, and walked to the 2 girls' table with a smile. He smiled and said, the 2 of you, it's fate that we met. Do you mind having a drink with me?" As the guy spoke, he didn't care whether the 2 agreed or not. He directly sat down and said, "By the way, this table is on me." At this time, the waitress brought Juliana and Catherine's things over. The guy smiled and raised his wine glass. Come, two beauties, let's have a drink. When the other mercenaries saw the handsome mercenary drinking with the two beauties, their eyes spat fire with jealousy. They couldn't help it. Who told him to be handsome? The handsome mercenary had a charming smile on his face. He had just made a bet with his companions that he would get the two girls into his bed. He had a hunch that tonight would be a wonderful night. Scram! The voice wasn't loud, but everyone in the mercenary tavern could hear it. It came from the mouth of the female mage. The handsome mercenary's hand that was holding the wine glass froze in the air. His face was stiff and his expression was awkward. He had a handsome appearance and was unstoppable in the field of flowers. There were even many young women who were willing to throw themselves at him. But he didn't expect that in front of the two girls, he would be embarrassed. What did you say? The handsome mercenary's face suddenly turned red. He felt that he had been greatly insulted. I told you to scram. Didn't you hear me? Juliana raised her voice. Catherine was somewhat gloating. Her sister's mood wasn't good. It was obvious that this brat came to touch her bad luck. You. I'm going to kill you. The handsome mercenary flew into a rage out of humiliation. His hand suddenly reached for the space bag on his waist. His movements were very fast, but Juliana's movements were even faster. She waved her right hand and a flame appeared out of thin air. Boom! The flames exploded, and the handsome mercenary flew out of the door as if he was riding the clouds. Grand Magus! When Juliana made her move, all the mercenaries were immediately shocked. The guys who were still arrogant just a moment ago put away their contempt and became silent. Some of them even rejoiced that they didn't go up to court death. Grand Magus, in the mercenary world, was definitely a beautiful person. At the very least, they would be the leader of a large mercenary group. With the strength of a Grand Magus, it wouldn't take much effort to kill everyone in the tavern. The handsome mercenary was thrown out, but he wasn't injured. It was obvious that the other party had shown mercy. He lost face and didn't care about the laughter of others. He ran away with a red face. Catherine's eyes lit up. Sister, your strength has improved again. You are now at the peak of Grand Magus. It seems that you will break through the sacred domain soon. How could the sacred domain be so easy to break through? Juliana withdrew her hand and sat down again. She silently sighed. I have also been stuck at the bottleneck of the peak of Grand Magus. I haven't been able to break through for several years. It seems that I won't be able to break through in the short term. Catherine silently sighed. I really don't know how those geniuses cultivate. Some of them become powerhouses of the sacred domain at an extremely young age. It is said that a powerhouse of the sacred domain promised to become the guardian of a country called the Kingdom of Doro. When those hostile countries and forces heard this news, they immediately withdrew their troop. I also know a little about this matter. I heard that this powerhouse of the sacred domain was too young. He wasn't even 20 years old. At this time, Juliana slowly raised her head. A look of unwillingness flashed in her eyes. Back then, I was also a genius who was the center of attention. My magical talent was unparalleled, and I became a Grand Magus at a young age. But why? Why can't I break through the sacred domain? I can't accept this, I can't accept this. Juliana had reason to be resentful. If others could break through at such a young age, she should be able to do so as well. In her opinion, as long as she could break through the sacred domain, all her difficulties would be easily solved. In particular, the news of the army pressing down on her was like a heavy stone that weighed down on her heart, making it difficult for her to breathe. Juliana had never yearned for power so much. Catherine quietly looked at her sister. She knew that compared to her, her sister was under even greater pressure. Suddenly, she had an idea. She grabbed Juliana's hand. Sister, it is said that the young powerhouse of the sacred domain has just advanced to the sacred domain. Do you think we can pull him over? Being with us means becoming enemies with the Holy See. I don't think he will be willing to do it. Juliana pondered for a moment. After a long time, she sighed. Let's try. It's good to try. If it doesn't work, we'll give up. Right, Catherine? Do you know this person's background? And where is he? Chapter 541. What? You said he's called Ron? Necromancer Ron? Catherine returned from a tour of the tavern and brought back this shocking news. Juliana's eyes widened in disbelief. Yes, it's him, Catherine said excitedly. Necromancer Ron, he has already advanced to the sacred domain. He killed Doro Kingdom's venomous manticore Night Ram, as well as Thunder Academy's Letrel and Aeolus Academy's Storm. Now, those two academies are on the verge of disintegration. This is simply unbelievable. Juliana slowly withdrew her gaze. He seems to be only 20 years old this year, yet he has already achieved so much. Juliana quickly calmed down. She quickly thought about it and shook her head. If it's him, I'm afraid we don't have any pornographic novels. There's hope. Back in Manchester, I sent him an invitation, but unfortunately, he didn't take it seriously. Moreover, Juliana bit her lip. The impression we gave him doesn't seem too good either. Let's just give it a try. There's no other way, Catherine said in a low voice. Juliana frowned and thought for a while before finally agreeing. All right, let's let Minister Carlos give it a try. I heard that his son is Ron's classmate. Ron rode his bone dragon and circled the sky a few times. When he returned to the kingdom of Moran, he was surprised to see Shea. She seemed to have been waiting there for a long time. Ron, Kadena. Big sister Shea. Kadena jumped off the bone dragon and flew into Shea's arms. Shea, why are you here? Ron asked in surprise. Weren't you still in the Doro Kingdom? Shea glared at him. She put her hands on her hips and said, What are you talking about? You took me, Kadena, away and left me there alone. Your bone dragon was so fast that I couldn't catch up with you even after chasing for a long time on my unicorn. I'm sorry. Ron was speechless and smiled awkwardly. At this time, Hera, Basara, Rainey, and the rest came out to welcome them. When they saw Ron, they were elated. Ron introduced Basara and Rainey to Kadena. Kadena was also very happy. She held Basara's hand and talked nonstop. Rainey walked lightly to Ron's side and reached out to pinch Ron's waist. Ouch! Ron grimaced in pain. Rainey smiled, revealing a row of small canine teeth. Tell me honestly, how did you manage to kidnap such a beautiful woman? Don't spout nonsense. She used to be my classmate at Ballarak's academy. Ron said anxiously. What about now? Rainey asked. She's my wife. Ron rolled his eyes and said. Rainey was speechless. She raised her small pink fist and said fiercely, I don't care how many wives you have, but if you dare to let Big Sister Basara down, I won't let you go. Ron shrugged helplessly. At this time, a palace guard ran over and whispered something in Hera's ear. Hera heard it and frowned. She looked at Ron at the side. Ron's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly asked, What's wrong? Hera nodded. It's like this. A messenger from the kingdom of Ebia's rebel army is here. He wants to see you. Ebian rebels. Ron heard it and sighed. He thought of Catherine and Juliana. Catherine was fine, but he didn't have a good impression of Juliana. This woman was too snobbish. Hera sighed and said, The Ebian rebels are a group of pitiful people. I roughly know why they are here. After seeing that you have advanced to the sacred domain, they want to invite you to be their protector. However, the Holy See has already said that whoever gets involved with them will die. The Holy Roman Empire has also sent 500,000 soldiers down south to destroy the Ebian rebels' headquarters in one fell swoop and eliminate all resistance. Ron, I think you shouldn't meet him. Getting involved in this mess won't do you any good, Holy See? Ron's eyes flashed. He hated the Holy See to the bone. If he could do something to make them suffer, Ron wouldn't refuse. He pondered in his heart, and a shocking plan slowly formed in his mind. Oh right, that messenger also claimed to be Prince Ron's classmate at the Ballarak's academy. At this moment the guard added, "Classmate?" Kadena and Shea looked at each other, their eyes filled with surprise. "Who could it be? Maybe we'll know each other," Shea said. "Since it's a classmate, then all the more reason to meet him," Ron said to the guard with his hands behind his back. He smiled and said, "Lead the way." The group of people passed through the courtyard of the back garden of the palace and arrived at the luxurious hall of the Kingdom of Moran that was specially used to receive distinguished guests from various countries. Strictly speaking, the fallen dynasty of Ebia could no longer be considered a country. It was just a loose force. However, Hera still decided to treat them with respect. When Ron's group arrived at the hall, the messenger immediately stood up and greeted Ron. Ron was stunned. "Ron? Fatty? Second fifth brother? How come it's you?" The messenger was none other than Fatty Kid, Ron's roommate. He was called Second Fifth Brother and was known as the fattest thief in history. When he saw Ron, an excited expression appeared on his face. "Second Fifth Brother, good brother! How come you're here?" Ron quickly ran over and hugged Kid tightly. He laughed heartily, filled with the joy of reunion. At first, the fatty was still a little fearful, but now he was completely relaxed. "Ron, I didn't expect you to still remember me after becoming a powerhouse of the sacred domain." "Nonsense, how could I not remember my brother?" Ron said with a smile. "This has nothing to do with the sacred domain. Shea, Kadena, Hera." At this moment, the fatty also saw his classmates from the Ballarak's academy and hurriedly greeted them. When the three saw the fatty, they were also very happy. Shea glanced at the fatty and smiled. "Fatty, I haven't seen you for a while. Although your strength hasn't improved much, you've become even fatter." The fatty chuckled. "I've never been very good at cultivation. It's better for me to go into business." When Ron thought of this guy who was weak but always charging at the front, never retreating, and always being carried off the stage in every fight, he sighed in his heart. He smiled and asked, "By the way, Second Fifth Brother, are you working for the Ebian rebels now?" Seeing that Ron had changed the topic, the fatty's cynical face turned serious. He nodded seriously. "Yes, I'm working for Mississippi. I'm from Ebia, and so is my father. He used to be the finance minister of the Kingdom of Ebia, and now he's in charge of 80% of the Ebian rebels' assets," he sighed. "The former Kingdom of Ebia has already been destroyed by the Holy Roman Empire, but rebuilding Ebia has always been our goal. Our rebels have always had the most popular support in Ebia. Those occupiers will die a horrible death." The fatty's tone was full of anger. "But you don't have a guardian," Hera didn't miss the opportunity to say. "Due to the strong influence of the Holy See, no one is willing to become your guardian, because this means that they'll be enemies with the Holy See." Hera knew the political situation of the Noah continent like the back of her hand, and she was showing more and more of a queen. "That's right." The fatty nodded heavily. He glanced at Ron. "Ron, I don't want to hide this from you. This time, I'm here on Miss orders to invite you to become the guardian of the Kingdom of Ebia." "Juliana," Ron muttered to himself, but didn't directly answer the fatty's question. "Yes, Miss Juliana is also the princess of the Kingdom of Ebia," the fatty said. "Ron, I'll tell you the truth. After the Kingdom of Ebia was destroyed, we formed a rebel army and launched a war against the Holy Roman Empire. But after a few years, the situation has worsened. The Holy See hasn't even sent out their experts from the sacred domain, and we've already been defeated." The fatty paused. "As a brother from the same dormitory, I really don't want you to be directly involved in this war. But this is Miss and Father's orders. I have no choice. Ron, if you don't agree, I'll definitely turn around and leave. But no matter what, we're still brothers." "We're still brothers." Ron looked at the fatty, the corners of his eyes slightly moist. Ron. Hera saw that Ron was moved by the fatty and became anxious. At this moment, Ron waved his hand, indicating for Hera not to speak. He muttered to himself, "The Holy See and I have an irreconcilable hatred. From this point of view, your miss and I have a common enemy." The fatty's body trembled slightly when he heard this. He looked at Ron in disbelief. This means, Ron, you're willing to be the guardian of the kingdom of Ebbia? You'll help us resist the Holy See and rebuild the kingdom of Ebbia? Of course. Ron smiled and nodded in agreement. I have conditions. Ron. Kadena and Hera were both shocked. They both knew what it meant to be the guardian of the kingdom of Ebbia. They looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. No problem, Ron. If you have conditions, feel free to state them. The fatty said straightforwardly. Ebbia used to be a rich kingdom. My father has also made a lot of money over the years. The fatty waved his hand and said, Ron, how many gold coins do you want? Just state them. Essence cores, weapons, and even black crystal coins, I can get them for you. The Ebbian rebels were not good at military, but they had no problems financially. The fatty's father was a business genius. He had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years and used it to fund the rebels. The fatty had also inherited his father's good point. After graduating from the Balarax Academy, he began to take over some of his father's businesses and did very well. I don't want anything. Ron smiled. I only want Juliana to agree to one condition. What condition? The afterglow of the setting sun sprinkled on the main road of the Moran Palace, covering it with a layer of golden light. A palace carriage stopped at the entrance of the Moran Palace. Ron and the others reluctantly bid farewell to the fatty and sent him to the carriage. The Moran kingdom's flag was hung on the carriage, indicating that it belonged to the royal family. It would send the fatty safely to the border of the Moran kingdom. The fatty sat in the carriage and waved goodbye to Ron and the others. Ron, I will let the young mistress consider your conditions. However, the situation is critical now. I believe she will agree. As long as she agrees, I will help you fight against the Holy See. Ron smiled. Go. This is my only condition. There is no need to talk about anything else. All right. The fatty nodded and said with a smile, Ron, regardless of whether the cooperation can be achieved or not, I hope you will come to Ebbia. My wife, Karachi, misses you very much. The carriage gradually went away, leaving behind a string of crisp hoofbeats. Ron, Kadena, Shea, and the others stood in place and watched the fatty leave. Ron, what condition did you make Juliana agree to? Hera asked curiously. When everyone heard this, they looked over at Ron with eyes full of curiosity. It's nothing. Ron smiled, revealing a row of snow-white teeth. I only have one condition, and that is to rebuild the Scourge Church in the kingdom of Ebbia. Ron looked at the sunset in the distance and said loudly. Chapter 542. In a dark room in Manchester, a weak philosopher's stone shone weakly, as if it would go out at any moment. In the room, more than 10 people sat close together. They were all important figures of the Ebbian rebels. Catherine was also present. Crash! A piece of paper was torn into pieces in Juliana's hand. Her beautiful face was filled with anger. Bastard, this is too much. What does he mean by rebuilding the Scourge Church? Does he want to become another Holy See? If this request is made, the kingdom of Ebbia will become a puppet. A puppet. She stood up with a swish and said coldly, Carlos, your son is Ron's classmate. His actions are too disappointing. Juliana's eyes emitted a faint flame, and the aura of a master enveloped the room. Seeing the young miss fly into a rage, no one dared to breathe loudly. In the middle was a slightly plump, middle-aged man. His small eyes shone brightly, and he was not someone easy to deal with. He was the kingdom of Ebbia's finance minister, Carlos, and Kid's father. However, Kid was not present. With his position, He was not qualified to participate in this meeting. In the face of the young Miss' anger and censure, Carlos was not flustered. He was an elder of the kingdom of Ebbia and controlled the economic lifeline of the Ebbian rebels. In terms of seniority, he was much older than Juliana. Young Miss. Carlos stepped forward and bowed slightly. He said indifferently, "I don't understand why young Miss is so angry. This is clearly a transaction. The other party has made such a request, and we can only choose to accept or reject. If young Miss doesn't agree, you can reject it directly. Why get angry?" Juliana's eyes were about to spit fire. She wanted to reject it, but the Holy Roman Empire's army was pressing down on her. If she rejected it, what awaited her would be a devastating blow. She might be able to escape with her life, but Manchester would be destroyed. She screamed, "But this condition is not fair. Can't you ask your son to negotiate with Ron to change the conditions? No matter how much money he wants, I'll give it to him. I can even let him enjoy privileges that are more honorable than those of the royal family. Isn't that enough? He actually wants to establish a force in Ebbia? Tell him to forget about it. I, Juliana, will do anything but be a puppet controlled by others. Young Miss, there is no such thing as fairness in this world. There is only strength. As a sacred domain powerhouse, Ron does indeed have the right to propose such a condition. If the young mistress had advanced to the sacred domain, she would naturally be able to refuse. However, Carlos raised his head and stared at Juliana. I believe that in the current situation, Miss Juliana will definitely choose to agree. 3 days. After waiting for only 3 days, Ron received Juliana's reply. The reply was very simple, with only 2 words. I agree. Ron held the letter that Juliana had sent through a special channel and smiled. His eyes flickered with excitement. This day had finally arrived. The kingdom of Ebbia would be the first country under the protection of the Scourge Church. The kingdom of Ebbia's vast territory and enormous wealth could be used to spread the teachings of the Scourge Church and the glory of the Grim Reaper. The millions of citizens of the kingdom of Ebbia would become the most devout followers of the Scourge Church. Ron could almost see a new and powerful Scourge dynasty descending. Perhaps it's time to do something, Ron muttered to himself. He smiled and stood up. With a wave of his wide necromancer robe, he covered his entire body. His body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared into the air. 100,000 years ago in Amros, the Scourge Church was a supreme existence. Its brilliance was like the sun, illuminating the entire continent. In an unremarkable classroom in the Balarax Academy, Vivian stood at the lectern, endlessly lecturing on the history of necromancy magic. The classroom was packed with students attending a necromancy class. What was strange was that Vivian was wearing the attire of an archmage despite being a teacher. Her students were all wearing mage robes as well. They were all listening attentively, and some were even attentively taking note. Ding-ling-ling. The sound of the end of class rang throughout the entire campus. At this moment, Vivian slowly closed her book. All right, today's class will end here. In the next class, we will continue to discuss the use of necromancy magic in actual combat. Yes, teacher. All the students had expressions of wanting to continue. They politely stood up and bowed, bidding farewell to their teacher Vivian. A gentle smile appeared on Vivian's face. She had secretly recruited these students. Most of them were children from poor families, and they were bone slaves who had already learned the wrong necromancy magic. When they came into contact with true ancient necromancy magic, they were shocked by its terrifying power. This was a power that wasn't weaker than any elemental energy. In fact, it was even stronger than them. Of course, the class was held in secret. The necromancy classroom had long been designated as a restricted area by the academy. All students were forbidden from entering, and necromancy students were also forbidden from leaving. The necromancy major was completely closed off. Vivian even had the students wear mage robes and pretend to be a mage class to conduct the class. Everything Vivian did was to conceal this potential power. She knew that these people were the seeds of necromancy magic, and their future achievements were limitless. Teacher Vivian, I have a question that I don't understand. Can I ask you? At this time, a voice traveled into Vivian's ears. Vivian looked and saw a 14-year-old girl standing in front of her, looking at her timidly. Hee, it's you, Lisa. Looking at the girl, Vivian smiled. This girl was one of the most diligent students in the class. She was the youngest, but her talent for necromancy magic was unparalleled. She had only studied necromancy magic for a year, and had already become an advanced necromancer. Lisa came from a poor family. Her father was a necromancer who had practiced the wrong type of necromancy magic. They were poor and destitute and were bullied by others. When she was 10 years old, her mother couldn't bear the family's poverty and left them, abandoning the family. All of this was due to a lack of strength. When Lisa had the opportunity to come into contact with true necromancy magic, she treasured it even more. Now, she had become one of the most dazzling students in the class. Of course, Lisa, please come to my office, Vivian said with a smile. Lisa nodded happily. She was very sensible and took the initiative to help her teacher tidy up the things on the table. When the two walked out of the necromancy classroom, talking and laughing, Vice Dean Dabbs of the Balarax Academy called out to Vivian, "Teacher Vivian, come with me for a moment." "Yes, Vice Dean." Vivian responded and turned to Lisa, saying, "Lisa, take my things to my office and put them on the table. Then wait for me there, I'll be back in a moment." "Yes, teacher," Lisa responded. After bidding farewell to the teacher and Vice Dean Dabbs, she hugged Teacher Vivian's lesson plans and books to her chest and ran excitedly to Teacher Vivian's office. At the corner of a corridor, Lisa bumped into someone with a bang, and the books in her arms fell to the ground. That person was a youth wearing a long black robe and looked to be only a few years older than Lisa. He had a head of short black hair that reached his ears and looked extremely spirited. "I'm sorry, little sister mage, did I hurt you?" The youth took the initiative to apologize as he reached out to help Lisa up. "It's okay, big brother, it's my fault. I bumped into you." Lisa also took the initiative to apologize. The black-robed youth smiled, and his appearance like a spring breeze won Lisa's favor. She didn't know why, but when she saw this big brother, she felt a sense of familiarity. "Oh right, little sister mage, where is the necromancy classroom?" The black-robed youth smiled and asked. "Necromancy classroom?" When Lisa heard this, she immediately shuddered and came to her senses. At this time, Lisa's expression gradually became serious and faintly carried some hostility. She carefully sized up the youth in front of her and said in a cold voice, "Not many people in the academy know about the necromancy major. Who are you? Why are you asking about this?" The black-robed youth stared blankly. "Actually, I'm here to find Teacher Vivian." "What? You're still looking for Teacher Vivian?" Lisa jumped up when she heard this. This youth of unknown origin actually wanted to read pornographic novels. Looking for Teacher Vivian, how could this be? Could it be that he's from the Holy See? Lisa's mind raced. The person in front of her didn't have the badge of an instructor, nor did he have the symbol of a student. There was an 80% chance that he was from the Holy See. Only those from the Holy See would be so interested in necromancy magic. When she thought of this, Lisa's killing intent surged. These are notes on necromancy magic? The black-robed youth picked up a book from the ground with interest. It was Vivian's notes on magic, and recorded some of her insights and experiences. Not bad indeed. I didn't think that Vivian had also reached this level. Ron casually flipped through it. With his sacred domain strength, he quickly saw a few errors. However, with Vivian's talent, it was already very impressive that she could reach this level without anyone's guidance. "Let go!" Lisa shrieked. She was like an angry lion, snatching the book from the black-robed youth's hands. These books aren't for you to read. Who are you? The black-robed youth was Ron. He had returned to the Balarax Academy to look for Vivian to discuss the grand plan of rebuilding the Scourge Church, but he didn't expect to be caught red-handed by Lisa. "You're talking about me? I'm—" Ron laughed and was about to say his name. "You don't need to say it, you're from the Holy See." It was Lisa who interrupted him, shouting, "What are you trying to do by sneaking into the Balarax Academy? Do you want to kill Teacher Vivian? Destroy necromancy magic?" Ah! Ron froze for a moment, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He never thought that one day he would be considered a member of the Holy See. Holy See? Do I look like one to you? Ron chuckled. Just as I thought, Di. Lisa was furious. She took out a bone staff from somewhere and waved it, causing a large amount of black soul energy to wildly seep out. "Undead from the depths of hell, accept my call and kill the enemy before you. Use his blood as a sacrifice to the sword of death, and use his soul to add glory to the god of death. Come out, skeleton warriors." Lisa chanted in a low voice, and a large number of skeleton warriors scrambled to crawl out from the ground. They held weapons in their hands, howling, and their eyes flashing with a green light. Ron was stunned. His mind was a little muddled. How did this young magician in front of him suddenly summon so many skeletons? Moreover, this wasn't the kind of necromancy magic that was regarded as trash, but true ancient necromancy magic. Ron's mind flashed. "You're not a mage, you're a necromancer." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.